Murray Gold is back. We have other things to talk about, but the main thing to talk about is that Murray Gold is back as the composer of Doctor Who. There are other interesting things to talk about from the last 3 Doctor Who magazines since we last talked in our They Don't Know How to Write discussion we had in mid-February. That was our last RTD2 talk, and lots of things have happened since then. Time has passed, magazines have passed, discourses have passed, all sorts of things have happened, and we'll dip into all of those today. But the centerpiece of what we're talking about is the big news that Murray Gold is back. So talking about all these things today will be myself, Neo from Australia, along with 2 Englishmen, Giga and Dilb. How do you guys feel about what's transpired over the last few months? Shooty's new costume, Murray Gold's return, the composition of a Doctor Who magazine cover in relation to Liz Sladen and David Tennant. How are you guys feeling?
There's just so many controversies, it's kind of hard to remember them all.
I would say what sticks out is that even though all the mini controversies, storms in the teacup, have happened, stuff like Gatto and Gibson in their 60s style outfits causes such an instantaneous, massive burst of popularity and positivity and joy and fun and stuff. And it really just shows not how easily pleased Doctor Who fandom are, but how easy it is to have fun when the show is clearly having fun and showing off that it's fun. I think Series 14 is setting itself up to be very beloved and embraced warmly by the fans in a way I don't think the show has quite been for a few years.
So much stuff, it's like so tertiary kind of like abstract things, and then just actually seeing like them in costume on set, it's like, this is what it's actually going to be. I think it's going to be fine.
Yeah, a bit of material reality wipes out all the abstract nonsense and bullshit, doesn't it?
It's so easy to just get instantly caught up in that excitement kind of thing.
I do think it's interesting to talk about, or things we will talk about, like that announcement of Doomsday, another transmedia project, and, interviews with the 60th directors and things. We'll go through all that stuff, and it is interesting, but it does feel kind of tangential when you see something like those photos of Ruby and 15, which just... those were tweeted out by Disney Plus and had all sorts of eyes on them, and people were just intoxicated in a great way, including all of us 3. They both looked fabulous. So, yeah, the show itself is coming at some point, and all these kinds of pre-show dramas we're enjoying. RTD is not just giving us a drama in the show itself, he's giving us like this whole little shadow drama in the lead up to the show as well. And that's very enjoyable, but it is a tangential thing, ultimately.
There's what I've missed. It's like the show has a presence all year round, and I took that for granted basically up until 2018.
With Murray Gold, I want to talk about how we feel in general that he's returned. Then I want to go through this excellent big interview with him in Doctor Who magazine 590, which it's really interesting, the stuff he has to say in there. I also want to go through some of his music to talk specifically about him as a composer and music he's made and how we feel about it, just to kind of get tangible with him. And yeah, how we feel about how he's coming back and some of the different attitudes towards that. And then we have all those other prizes to discuss as well. So to start, Murray Gold coming back, it's a terrible regression. Do we think so?
No. Because I don't think he's a regressive composer.
I would say proportionally it is no more nor less of a regression than getting Russell T Davies back as the showrunner. And as such, I think it's entirely appropriate. As
soon as you've got Russell T Davies coming back, it's like, he's going to bring everything that made his era. So I was completely expecting Murray Gold to be back. I don't know, maybe I just made peace with it, or maybe I'm just genuinely happy we're going to get some great music again.
I liked Sega Akinola. I think he did a lot of nice music. Sometimes I listen to it while I'm working and things like that. I think he made a lot of nice music.
It's good background music, is what you're saying.
And he got more dramatic. Like Series 12, I like the Time Lord motif he came up with. The Spy Master one was fun. I don't at all think like Sagan bad and Murray good. I like Sagan. I like a lot of his music. But Murray Gold is like... my love of him exceeds Doctor Who. Like, I love everything he does. I follow him as a composer. I don't follow him as a man who worked on Doctor Who. I follow him as a musician and a composer because I love his music and I love what he composes. He's bigger than Doctor Who to me,
Yeah.
I suppose. And for him to come back, it's not a hyperbole for me that I care more about him coming back than I do anyone else that's come back. I care more about him coming back than I do Tennant or Davis or anyone. I feel uncomplicatedly joyful about him coming back. Whereas, I've chewed over things like Tennant and Davis, and I'm broadly interested and happy, basically with that sort of thing, at least now in our pre kind of stage. But Murray, I feel nothing but joy over. And I think the only other person I've really felt that way with is Rachel Talalay coming back. But that's kind of a different, like she's from the Moffat era and now she's kind of in Russell's second era and everything. That's kind of and a director, she'll do, one of the 60th, and I'm sure she'll do more in RTD2 eventually. But it's not like someone who's there all the time, like Davis or Shooty or Murray Gold. And so for me, this is the first thing I felt where it's just pure and utter joy. And there's no reservations and there's no complications and there's no me thinking, well, it might actually be weird in some ways. I feel truly happy about this happening. Geek, how do you feel?
Well, I feel relaxed. I think it would have been utterly wrong, to be honest, for RTD2 to not have Gold as its composer. I think I was worried that, like, not to rag on him, but like a composer that people often compare to Gold and who did a recent thing of RTD's was Blair Mowat, right? And I don't think Gold, but a bit not quite as goldiness as Gold was really like a route you could meaningfully go, because I'd just be thinking of Gold all the time. So I think it's right to have Gold back in this context. And to be honest, he is a world-class composer of soundtracks. So it's just fucking ridiculous to act like there's nothing bad about this, really.
I think it's difficult to express this without sounding like a wanker, because maybe I am a wanker when it comes to this thought, and so that's just inevitable. But I fixate on soundtracks a lot. Like, I listen to, it's embarrassing, it's weird how much I will listen to soundtracks over and over and again. I think, Dilby, you would have seen, you're not dissimilar, I think, but like the Spotify players I have for certain soundtracks is just absurd. It's like literally trying to calculate, but where was the time of the day when I was listening to this? It's just, I'm very, very obsessive and fixated on like that sort of thing. I'm not a soundtrack guy. I feel embarrassed. I'm not like, I listen to more music that isn't soundtracks than music that is soundtracks.
You're a good soundtrack guy.
Yeah, I'm not like I only listen to TV soundtracks, but I do listen to a lot of soundtracks and scores, and I feel like I listen to loads and loads and loads of them, especially contemporary ones, and especially like motivic, like leitmotif-led ones. Those really, really interest me to see who is in that space.
Those are the rewarding ones. And that's what Murray Gold does. He does really deep soundtracks that they're just so rewarding to listen to, because you'll watch the show and then you'll think, oh, I recognize this motif. And you'll think about, where did this motif originate and how is he using it? How is he spinning it? What's the thematic relevance? Yeah, it sounds wankery, like you said, but it's true. People talk about other composers who are fantastic, and that's great. But what Murray is doing and the scale of what he's doing is it's not common at all. What the amount of motifs he's made distinct in so many ways, and the way he weaves them together, and just the ease with which he does different things with them, the ease with which, like a Shielders theme morphs throughout Series 9, or which he can just, insert a tiny little hint of the 12th Doctor's theme in certain sections of entirely different music, across it. The ease with which he can play with all his themes, and the amount of themes he has. If you go like on Spotify and you load up all like the albums together that he's released of Doctor Who, remember he hasn't released them all. It's over 24 hours of music you've got there. I was just going to say, like, especially as the soundtracks go on, I guess he gets more confident, maybe he gets more time, I don't know. But they start to approach like 3 hours, and that's for just like a 13-hour series. That's not common.
We're talking about like a Howard Shore Tolkien or a John Williams Star Wars universe is what Murray Gold has unto himself, basically, with what he's done with Doctor Who. And that, it's a really, 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 really big thing to say, let's step aside from that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's the wrong move, but it's not just, someone's done the soundtrack for 2 series and, they had some good motifs. It's an enormous, cinema rivaling musical landscape that Murray has built up over 10 series. That's an enormous thing to set aside. I'm not saying it's necessarily the wrong thing to set it aside, but it is absolutely uncommon in TV. Game of Thrones didn't have this much music. Game of Thrones has a motif-led soundtrack. It has less music than this. It is absolutely world-class, like Gig said, the universe that Murray has built up musically. People talk about this like it's interchangeable, like, oh, the composer who did a great job on Broadchurch, did 3 series of Broadchurch, they could just as well do Doctor Who. And yeah, they could go do fantastic work on Doctor Who, but they're not the same thing as what Murray did with 10 series of Doctor Who. It's a different motivic universe that he's made there. It's a cinema rivaling thing he's made there. And I kind of bristle at it being talked about in ways that's interchangeable with other TV when he's done something that, so few people on TV have ever accomplished.
Definitely.
Yeah, he's inextricable from the history of New Who as a program.
He just feels like Doctor Who to me. And the only way I could see replacing him is if someone completely new comes in and does something completely different. And I guess that's what Chibnall wanted to do, like a big clean break. And, it's a valid thing to go for. If RTD is coming back, he's doing a new era, but it's also, linked to his previous era, and it's going to be linked to the Moffat era, I'm sure. I don't see why you would throw away that musical continuity when it's already so rich and deep and can only be additive,
Yeah, in Series 11, I liked Sagan's work the most because what was there there was no Time Lord theme, there was no Captain Jack theme, there was no need for it. And so we were in Sagan's kind of world. And when I had issues with the music in Series 11, it was mostly to do with how it was being used in the episode or how it was being mixed in the episode more than the music itself.
Yeah.
Which isn't like that. I mean, the music is made for the TV show. So like what I'm saying there isn't like it's not like a get out of jail free thing. Music for TV is for TV. But you know what I mean? In a vacuum, the music is, in a squid-sized vacuum corridor, the music is good a lot of the time.
It's important that, it suits the scenes that happen. And often I just didn't find it was doing anything.
I'm not even saying, when like a bit of music jars with a scene, I'm not saying it's Sagan or Murray's fault because music is much more complicated than people think. Go listen to the 50th soundtrack score and you'll see most of that isn't in the special because it's not like Murray Gold gets the episode last and everyone says, Murray, you've got last final cut of this, put the music in and that's it. You've got final control. That's not what happens. They create the music and they're not the top of the food chain. The things are going to change and can change with how that music ends up getting used. But at the same time, I think things got very weird in Series 12. Like for me, one of the most bizarre moments of the Chibnall era overall, not just the story, like not just musically, but of the whole enterprise was Captain Jack returns and it's played as this big triumphant moment. Captain Jack's back. And the whole joy of that moment is meant to be, hey, the person we like at the time anyway, most people liked, is back. This is great. He's back. And so we have some music going on there. And like Sagan's talked about, he wanted to make this like a warm piece of music and it's like, happy you're back, he's back and everything. Why is it a new piece of music?
It could have been for anyone.
Yeah. I mean, if there's some sort of rights issue, I get it. And that may well be the case. If somehow Chibnall couldn't get like permission off Murray somehow, if that's the way the music kind of works for past themes from series 1 to 10, I get that. But in terms of like the universe of motifs of Doctor Who, that felt bizarre. Don't you agree, Gig? That moment where it's not Jack's theme or any theme we've heard before. It's like this new bit of music to announce this old thing is back again.
Yes, and I rather think whenever with Sagan you got any new bit of music that announced itself in any particular way, it tended to also not feel necessarily all that distinct from the other sort of mini themes that he had going along. I think often, even if you might think it was good in a vacuum as music or whatever, I felt often as a soundtrack it was sludge, to put it bluntly. Obviously, I know this is the gold celebration hour, not the Akinola dragging hour, so I will not drag that out any further. I
think what we're just trying to demonstrate there is that it's not a small thing to set gold aside. And I know the kind of vibe here is people saying, but this is insane to treat, one man as like an institution that's inextricably tied with the show. But like, yeah. Can you think of anyone else who merits it? The way he has with his library and the universe he's created there. Like, I think, I just don't like this idea that we have this normalcy of how TV is meant to be achieved and we meant to switch things every so often. We're meant to change this everything so often. It's just to kind of set aside, Doctor Who has done something not done by everyone else there. It's done something that HBO hasn't done. and, Disney TV shows haven't done. It's accomplished something huge unto itself. It's world-class in what it's done with that universe of music it's made. I just think it's so hasty to say, let's get rid of that. Let's do something else instead. You can do that, but it's a really huge move, especially when people, then are trying to vaunt up, a Doctor Who is so magical because it does this and it does that and it never does that. I feel like you're kind of compressing it into normalcy if you're saying, well, forget that. I know that's unique and huge, what we've got there, but forget all that because we'll just do interchangeable composers, like other shows work. I think it's kind of that dissonance, though, between sometimes the thing that is unique is to keep something the same in a way.
I don't know what the right situation is, but it's not impossible, is it, that a new composer could use some of the old motifs and do that in a new way, put them in a new kind of... it might be tricky. It's not impossible. I think often I also think what people want when they say, get a new different sound world, a new composer in, is that they want it to sound radically different, which I get, I understand, because, in some ways the show has been in the same box for a really long time, in some ways, and I see people wanting totally different kinds of showrunner, totally different kinds of actor, that's completely understandable. But also, I think it's, you do rather need a working show first, which I don't think we've had for a while. So I think it's actually more important if you have something that is just so manifestly good. It's just absurd to want to get rid of it.
Golden.
I think. Yeah, golden. That's one way of putting it.
Also, the thing is, Murray Gold's already branched entirely separate showrunners and entirely separate eras. People talk about him as if he did the same thing for 10 series, and he reinvented himself within the same eras sometimes. You listen to the Series 1 soundtrack, actually listen to it, then listen to the Series 3 soundtrack. That is not the same thing at all. Even down to there's no orchestra in Series 1 compared to there's a lot of orchestra in Series 3. It's not the same thing going on in there at all. You go into Series 5 and we're in a completely different world again. You go into Series 8, you go into the latter part of Series 10. We're worlds apart again and again and again there. And you then go listen to some of the music he's done for Hoodwinked or for Years and Years or his other shows, and we're in different worlds again. I don't know why we're getting this vision that this incredibly, multi-talented composer can't change his music when he's demonstrated that to you for over 24 hours of music that he can, and that he relishes doing that, and that he's really good at doing that. I don't know. This kind of compressed view of, it's going to sound the same. The same as what? He already changed a billion times.
Exactly.
I would say, just to maybe provide the balance to that, is that as much as he has obviously changed his style a lot, and I vastly prefer stuff he did in Moffat's run to stuff he did in RTD's run often.
Me too.
I think there are specific points where he feels very different from anything he's doing in the other years. As true as that is, he is still, at the end of the day, one composer. And he's using, you've got your symphony orchestra kind of style that kind of characterizes most of it. Occasional, more lapses into electronic stuff, circa Capaldi. But nonetheless, he is still one composer. So I think there are going to be natural limits in terms of what he can physically do, as a man, where his actual, abilities and strengths lie. So I think I think people say they want something different. And the thing is, what that opens up is an infinity of possibilities. You can have infinite unspecified possible alternatives. There's all kinds of music in the world, right? All kinds of music that has never been within 10 miles of Doctor Who. And I get feeling galvanized by that infinity of possibilities. But I think the material possibilities of keeping, a world-class composer kind of trump the negatives of not having a non-specified alternative, if you see what I mean. It really is the tangible material positive versus the undefined nebulous negative. Yeah.
I feel I know that this comparison is flawed in a lot of ways, and I agree with some of the ways people say it's flawed, and I disagree with some of the ways people argue it's not flawed. Does that sentence make sense? It made sense in my head. But sometimes I see people bring up, and they either say it is or isn't like this, and I'll just get to the point. Let's kick John Williams off episode 7 of Star Wars. We're in a new era. We've got new main characters. Let's get a new composer in. Let's kick Howard Shore off the first Hobbit movie. He did an incredible work with Lord of the Rings, but hey, this is a new story, The Hobbit. Let's get a new composer in. I say that, and people look at me like I've got two heads if I suggest kicking Williams or Shore off their franchises. Why is this different? Is it different?
I would say one key difference is that with Star Wars follow-up trilogies and the Hobbit trilogy, those are both really consciously trying to evoke nostalgia for a particular brand that has existed for like I guess not even so much a brand, like a particular story that is being readapted and I guess extended in some cases artificially. And I think with Doctor Who, as we've talked about in some ways, Doctor Who doesn't have the same kind of relationship with lore or continuity or being the same thing like forever. You know, if you look at the history of Doctor Who, it's lots of different shows, right? So I don't think you can't quite say it's like Star Wars, because the whole project of like a Star Wars sequel trilogy is trying to get that nostalgia for the original, make people feel like it's the same thing. Whereas, you know, with say like any given era of Doctor Who, it's actually going to be mostly trying to do its own thing, even though it is adapting the character of the Doctor and the TARDIS and some concepts from the show into itself. It is nonetheless, and obviously in some cases it is going to be trying to pander to nostalgia. That's not necessarily the main point of what it's doing. So it's conceivable that it wouldn't necessarily share every last little like defining tonal texture feature with past eras of the show. I mean, you know, they're not getting back like, I mean, they didn't get back Kev McCulloch from like the Sylvester McCoy era, even though he did it in the past, right?
That's what I was gonna. Yeah, Gold isn't the originating composer, the way that Williams and Shaw. But then again, there were Lord of the Rings films before Wingnuts. You know, before Howard Shaw did it. So, if we're splitting hairs that way, but yeah, John Williams originated Star Wars musically. So I mean, you can kind of argue like, when did Doctor Who as New Who start? Does it matter? Like, it's been so many different shows since 2005. Does it, like, you can split all those hairs, but yeah, he didn't originate the show's music, you know, back to 63. So there is that side of it as well. But then, Dil, are you on the other side at all? Do you kind of see what I mean? There is some validity to that argument, I think. Do you see any validity to that comparison?
No, totally. I will say, since the sequel trilogy ended, we've had some great composers on the TV side who've done their own spin, kind of reinventing Star Wars, like Ludwig Göransson and Nicholas Brittle. But no, I totally see what you mean. And yeah, I'm just like you, very uncomplicatedly. Maybe it's just fanboyish love, adoration for Murray, but
it's not. We both listen to his music a lot. We know this is genuinely really, really, really world class. Yeah,
we know he's good.
Yeah, maybe the wrench in the whole like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings thing is that maybe I have a cynical perspective towards nostalgia pandering in those franchises, because they're trying to re-evoke the success of earlier movies, completed earlier like movie series by like artificially reviving them for new go-rounds. And I guess maybe the difference with Doctor Who and New Who in particular is that the thing being revived here is actually worth reviving. Like, as much as RTD's first era, obviously it was complete, he left, but it's not complete, he didn't complete Doctor Who when he left. Like, there's still more you can do. So I think in reviving stuff like gold soundtracks for Doctor Who, you aren't just artificially trying to dig in like a dead well or anything like that. You're looking at something that still has a lot of potential for life, because it doesn't have a defined start or end exactly.
I think the key thing that's occurred to me here, and this is kind of the difference, because I think Williams... No, I'm not touching that. The key thing for me here, I think, is when I think of what's exciting me about Gold's return, what's exciting me is not like hearing all the strange creatures again, hearing a noble girl around town again. You know, like, that would be fun.
Are you sure it isn't? Is that true? That's really not what excites you about it?
Okay, look, that would be exciting. Yes, but me squeeing at Murray being brought back is chiefly, and I'm serious here, it's because I think the Series 5 soundtrack and the Series 6 soundtrack are not related to the RTD1 soundtracks. It's not until Series 7 that we really start reprising some stuff from there seriously. They're their own unique, new, fresh worlds, you know, bursting with all these new themes. And a lot of people would say those are the best work Murray did on the show. So his best work isn't this cumulative thing of like by Series 4 when he had all these... He'd built up a proper world to himself that he could pull and rearrange and reinterpret in all sorts of ways. That wasn't, I think, the height of Murray, at least I think in a lot of people's eyes. His breakout track is I'm the Doctor, which is new, which comes not... It comes when a new showrunner comes in. It comes when Moffat comes in. It comes in when the show is all changed and something totally new is happening. When he makes this whole entire new universe of music is when... I think a lot of people would argue the Series 5 soundtrack is maybe his best one, and it's certainly his most popular one, I think, in some ways, at I'm the Doctor alone. Series 8, again, reinvents the musical world of the show in a... it's my favorite way the music of the show was ever invented. It reinvents the whole way the music is conceived of for the show again. My excitement is with Shooty, what are we going to get? This is going to happen again. We're not going to have the music that Tennant, well, the first Tennant or maybe the second Tennant. We're not going to get that music. We're not going to get Matt's music. We're not going to get Capaldi's music. We're going to get a new musical world for the show again from the man who's shown how incredibly good he is at achieving that, while he's also got this huge bank of, this wealth of past music he can always draw into, for musical storytelling in new and old ways as well. That's what really excites me, is that he's so good at making these new musical worlds for different versions of the Doctor, and I'm just beside myself with excitement for what he's going to do for Shooty's Doctor.
And he was changing year to year, and now it's been 6 years. So imagine all the change. That's a lot of years.
Think of Years and Years, which, sounded different to what he was doing with Capaldi Who. That was another kind of version of music he was doing there. It's just, I'm so excited to see what he's going to do. For the 60th, I think it'll be very interesting what he will do. But for the Series 14, it's just going to be incredibly exciting, I think. That's my true excitement. And it's kind of I know this might sound silly to some people who have been hyped for Series 14 all along, but this is what's kind of kicked me into true excitement for the series now, was thinking, oh my God, we're going to get 8 episodes of, Murray investing these characters and these stories with, his life into them, his music into them. And that just, it excites me so much. I'm really, really, really pumped for Series 14 now.
So did you not believe it when the certain leak source implied that Gold would be coming back like ages ago? Because that was a thing. That was part of the supposed leaks, that RTD was making calls to all kinds of people, including Gold. So it was on the cards, I think, even long before it was confirmed.
The 60th, I always thought was probably going to be him. That always, leaks or no, the 60th being him just made sense, really. Series 14 felt like a bigger ask to me, because that's actually coming back on board. That's saying, this is my day job for good. This isn't a victory lap. This is me here back in the old chair again. And I thought that was a bigger ask, and I thought that maybe we'll get Blair Mowat, who was doing Class, and you did Nolly with RTD, one of the rare cases. Bob and Rose and Nolly are the rare cases of Murray Gold not doing an RTD show. So I was thinking maybe we're getting Blair Mowat, who I like a lot, and I like his music. He does really good stuff with Big Finish.
Yeah, his Torchwood stuff's really good.
I listen to too much Big Finish, and I have a lot of opinions on the music. The music I can compliment is Blair Mowat's for Torchwood, which is really, really good. And
again, he's someone who will remix Murray themes. It all comes back to Murray.
Yeah, that's like, yeah. He's like, I'm not calling him a mini Murray, because he's got a lot of his own interesting ideas that he does. But
yeah,
for RTD to rehire him to do the main show would feel kind of like you may as well just get someone completely different if you're going to get a different composer, I think, at that stage. Because, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, my point is that my excitement isn't to hear, strange creatures underneath Shooty. My excitement isn't to hear underneath the Shooty facing off the Daleks. My excitement is to hear what Shooty's theme is going to be, and, what Ruby's themes are going to be, and, the slug theme. That's what I'm excited.
But also what feels like nostalgia pandering with Star Wars, I think it wouldn't feel as egregious with Murray Gold, because he's always remixing and finding new, thematic significance to older themes. Just like playing a theme you might associate with a certain character, and then applying it, to a completely separate situation. But it will make you think of that character, and it will make you think, I can look at it from a different angle. I don't know. It's
on the commentary for Spyfall 1. There's a lot of effusing over. Sagan put the Spymaster theme in the scene where the car gets taken over, like die on the car GPS, and the car's whirling around on the road. And everyone's marveling at, this is incredible that we got the Spymaster theme in a scene where we didn't realize the Spymaster was involved until later, which is that's great. It reminds me, at the end of that commentary, there's also a moment where all the actors are marveling at Sasha did different interpretations of the scene when we did different takes. It's yeah, that's great.
It's the bare minimum, I think, is what you're getting at. Yeah, that's the thing. I think this is it's overlooked, but gold soundtracks are complex, right? They actually get really specific about specific characters and moments. They have incredibly specific tonal changes, and there is just so much going on.
They reward people who pay attention.
There's things like, there's like meme moments like where in Dark Water, it's Murray's music that like announces it's the Cybermen who are in like what we learn as St. Paul's. There's meme moments like that, but
Sorry, I've watched reaction videos to that, and some people don't notice, and it just adds this extra layer because there's still the visual. Oh, the doors kind of look like teardrops. Yeah, so some people even miss layers, but it's just it adds like a fun little beat. But as I say, it's kind of memey, and there's definitely much more emotionally complex examples of that, I'm sure.
I think like Sagan does blend his motifs sometimes. In The Timeless Children, there's blending between 2 or 3 themes there at certain points with the Time Lord theme and the Cybermen theme and other themes going on there. He does do that. I'm not saying he doesn't. But it's also what the writing is doing. In Death in Heaven, we get one of the 11th Doctor's themes is like kind of blended, with the 12th Doctor's theme there in that big cathartic moment he has when he says, I'm an idiot. And, he comes to a self-actualization moment. The 11th Doctor isn't in that scene. That's not what the music storytelling isn't saying there's Cybermen around and there's Time Lords around. The music storytelling is doing something deeper there. We're getting a deeper kind of storytelling for why that bit of music might be in that scene and what that's saying about the character. I think we're just operating at a kind of different level. It's not just announcing this scene relates to another thing. There's another person in this scene. There's a kind of deeper musical storytelling. And part of this is because he's been part of the show and part of Russell's mind for so long. Like, this is a really central creative figure that is if you read the liner notes for the soundtracks like I have, he has immense understanding of the characters and the stories and the themes, like the literary themes of the show. Yeah.
The things that I choose to do, I have to have a way into them. I have to love them, because otherwise I don't know how I'm going to work on them. I just allow myself to make myself upset while I'm watching this thing, and sometimes it's ridiculous and it seems really narcissistic, if in one way, but I will sit there imagining something and I will bawl my eyes out. And in the end, it's like, it's really good to be able to trust that mechanism, because that is ultimately, there's probably tons of you here that can write music, and it's not really, music is an art, and this is more of a sort of craft thing, and a sort of you can make somebody cry with one little piano chord. It's just about where you're putting that stuff. And as Richard Bellis, the film critic, wrote, writing film music is not writing film scores. It's where it goes. And so I really trust my inner mechanism. It's one of the only things about myself I do trust is my own inner mechanism for working out what is going on in a scene and what people will respond to.
As a composer, I don't have a protective shield against what's happening. It goes right into me, and, sort of empathetic overdrive. I love this show. I mean, it puts you on the rack, and one minute you're flying around London, and the next minute you're on some kind of go-kart in space, and then this just comes down to 2 people saying goodbye quite often, and it's tragic and it kills me every time. So yeah, I really live that. So it's a great show to work on.
I'm a big believer in looking and studying the script. I sometimes try and write music from the script. Before I've seen the rushes or any assemblies, just get the character themes. It's always easy to work on a Russell script, because they sing. His scripts sing. So writing music for them is a really easy job, Mm-hmm. Well, he is like the best writer on television. Honestly, there isn't anybody who would turn down the job. I mean, Russell could ask anybody to do the music and they would. So, why do I do it? Because I'm asked, So, and I just love his work. I love the fact that I always used to say, and it is still true, even though Russell started to kill off his characters, which is something he didn't used to do. He's got such a overwhelming love for humanity. He's so affable towards this species that live here. He's got such generosity towards everything and everybody. I really like that. I think it's just such a lovely thing, and it's quite unusual in not just in TV. It's just quite unusual in art generally. To be that warm, to have so much tenderness and warmth towards the human.
He's just so in tune with the writing. It's like he has such a understanding of both Russell and Moffat.
Yeah, it's a different sort of thing than there's two things in a scene. And so I'll put the music for both of them on. It's a different sort of thing. We'll get more granular with looking at some of his music later. Should we move into the interview now? Do you have any other just general impression thoughts, Gig, before we start looking at what Murray himself has to say?
I'm good.
So in Doctor Who magazine 590, there's a great interview between the great Benjamin Cook. That's always who we like to see doing these. And Murray Gold. And the interview is titled Gold's Faithful. 6 years after leaving Doctor Who, composer Murray Gold is back. I couldn't be happier, he tells Ben Cook. But I won't be quiet, it won't be safe, and I won't be calm. I'm not going to read out all of this, but the bits that are relevant to the sorts of things we talk about, I will read out. It's a really good interview. It's Ben Cook, of course, it's a really good interview. So, by the time you read this, the news will be out. Murray Gold is rejoining Doctor Who. 18 years. Jeez, I don't like that. Wow. 18 years after Rose. That is a long time. Anyway, 18 years after Rose, the first episode he scored, and 6 years since his swan song serial, Twice Upon a Time. We predict that this will be an internet breaker and that a lot of magazine readers will be very pleased. Murray says, I don't get out much. I don't do social media. But if people are happy, that's really cute. I like that. Murray was sad to leave in 2017. Quote, but I'd had a wild ride. Well, tears must now be unswept. Suck all those tears back in. So he sounds happy or even relieved to be back.
Yeah.
Doesn't he? He doesn't sound like he wanted to leave. Like I've seen a lot of people project onto him saying, he wanted to leave and they're dragging him back. I've seen a lot of weird psychoanalysis. I've read a lot of interviews with him, so I knew that wasn't going to be the case. And this one, it's exceedingly clear that he's beyond revved up and he really, really wanted to come back. He's very happy to be back.
Yeah, it seems framed here like the rectifying of an injustice. They're bringing him back in this interview. It seems framed that way.
Yeah, that is interesting.
You got to remember, he's worked on the show more than Russell and Moffat in some ways.
By this point, the Christmas specials in particular are getting 11, 12 million people watching them. On Christmas Day, a family experience. One of the few, I guess, on television that we get these days. Do you ever even remotely think about that while you're doing it? Do you feel that pressure?
No, not at all, no. I mean, I think I probably feel... I'm like the old guard on Doctor Who now, I'm the one that's been there all the time. And I feel like if I respond to something a certain way, I think to some extent, people use me as an emotional gauge for what it's about. I mean, it has even been known that somebody has asked, do I like it, as if it mattered. From within what does Murray think about it? Because normally that question is only put to, well, what did, the people with the power think about it?
You have the power.
I don't have the power, I just, occasionally someone listens to me.
He's had an unbroken streak of full time doing his job on the show for that amount of time. Like, this was a absolutely gigantic piece of his life. All the music he's made, all the work he's done onto it. This is an enormous part of his life. I just bristle at this kind of interchangeable reading. But yeah. And he's a smart man. Ben Cook talks about, before the interview even really starts, he's off talking about all sorts of things. He's riffing on simulation theory. I quite enjoy the lightness that this idea gives me, that I don't even realize that I don't exist. He starts talking about life after death. You go into the ground and get eaten by worms, although... ... before Ben Cook brings it onto track and starts talking to him about his decision to return to Doctor Who. And Murray insists it wasn't a decision because free will is an illusion. You know, Ben Cook asks. No, says Murray, no. Ha, no. Because nobody who's asked to do a Russell show would turn it down. I'm certainly not gonna. I mean, obviously I'm going to do it. I can't not do it. So I never decided. They just asked me. I'm not sure I decided to do it the first time around either, in 2005. I didn't weigh things up and go, oh, on the plus side this, on the downside that. You know, I just went, yes, of course. And I kept saying yes for 12 years.
When I do a show, when I do anything in life at all, I try and milk it for all of the philosophical content I can get from it, because you're working with people who are really bright, who are passionate about stuff, who've got stuff to tell you, and you're basically privileged to be spending time with them. You know, I grew up in Portsmouth, a middle-class family, and I'm hanging out with real, northern working-class writers who've got amazing stories from themselves, the like of which are as foreign to me as they would be to someone from Mars. I was up in West Yorkshire Playhouse, and because I'd written this play and it was being performed, and Christopher Eccleston was starring in it, and he kept on vanishing and not learning his lines because he was doing screen tests for this stupid thing, and obviously, which nobody would watch. And why isn't he doing my play properly? And then he came, he said to me, "Oh yeah, it's amazing, Murray. It's proper stuff." Like, what? And he said, like, it's amazing stuff. Like, one of the companions goes and sees their father die, and it's proper drama. And I was like, yeah, okay, we could just do my play, please. And all of the Doctor Who lot came up to see the play because they were supporting Chris, and then there was the announcement, and then Chris sort of went into he had played cat and mouse with the press. So I was right there when all of that was happening, but it was nothing at all to do with me, because that was it was about April or May 2004. I just didn't think about doing Doctor Who at all, really. And I got an email, and I think I subconsciously pretended that I didn't want to do it, and told myself that as a kind of sucker for it, not happening.
Russell T Davies sent me an email, and it said, "Hey Murray, should have asked this before. Do you want to write the music for Doctor Who? Love, Russell." And I wrote back instantly and said yes, thank you. And then the rest was history. I don't think I knew what it was going to be at that point, so I treated it just like another show, with all of the same kind of approach that I would anything else. It was only later, when it became a sort of massive hit in the first season, that I started to feel, well, I probably should have felt daunted about that. I think I wrote an email to my dad, because my dad had read that Doctor Who was coming back, and he said, "Have they asked you yet?" And I said, "No, I'm sure they won't do that." And first of all, I emailed Russell back and just said, "Yes, of course." And then I sent an email to my dad and said, "Oh, they asked me, and I'm doing it." So, it's quite straightforward. 2 emails.
See, the way he says, no one would turn down an RTD show, it makes me wonder if someone else had taken over after Chibnall and they'd asked Gold back. Do you think he'd still have done it? Or did it have to be Davies who brought him back into the fold? Yeah.
He would have come back, I think. I don't know the man.
I think he probably would, yeah.
But my impression is attachment to the show, and I'm not, trying to put anything out there, but I don't get the impression he was, joyous about leaving in 2017. So I think he would have said yes. If it was someone he didn't know at all, maybe they'd have to pitch it to him, more than if Moffat had returned or someone like that. But I don't think it's just to do with Davis. Ben Cook brings up an interesting point. He says, it's hard to overstate the extent to which Murray's music is etched into the fabric of younger millennial and Gen Z childhoods. Back then, Doctor Who was everywhere, and Murray's music, like the show itself, quickly achieved pop culture status. It graced every new episode, then was clipped and repackaged and uploaded to emerging social media platforms like mid-noughties debutante YouTube and its latter-day challenger TikTok. It got a further boost from the music streaming boom. I Am the Doctor is now almost as recognizable as the show's actual theme.
Which is ironic considering, the Doctor it was composed for left in 2000, 10 years ago. Jesus.
Yeah, I had that weird moment with Rose. Yeah.
The longevity of I Am the Doctor is quite something.
I mean, I remember when I sent in, I Am the Doctor for the first time in series 5. And I mean, I didn't know that they had gone to it and even notice that there was a new theme there. But from the second they heard it, they sort of said, I mean, I think it was Beth at the time and Piers said, and Stephen, of course, they just said that, that piece that can you just put it here as well and put it. And I was like, oh, good. Good. They noticed it. I mean, that's the first stage. Does it get through the executives? Does it stay on the show?
Of course.
Sometimes I feel like it, I've probably told this story before, but there was somebody who really hated the bit that goes da da dun 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 da da dun dun dun. It was like that B section of I Am the Doctor, and they just wanted me to get rid of it. And if I had, then that would have never sounded the same. When you associate a theme with a character you love, of course it's going to get the emotional drive that the Who theme is always going to be Doctor Who. That's what it is. But when I Am the Doctor represents Matt Smith, and it will always represent Matt Smith for people now. That's just done.
Let's just throw them out. Let's get someone else in. It means nothing to compose that. Anyone could do it. The magazine talks about like the proms and, during lockdown, how people were doing joint huge covers, all sorts of scores and scores of fans working together. It's talking about how his music is connected with people a lot, which we can speak to. Like we've listened to it a lot. Yeah, I think a lot of us would also have special like moments of our lives where we can remember his music being helpful. I mean, you can say this with anything. Any sort of music ever can do that. But I think just his music is very powerful and it's been around a long time. It's a huge part of people's lives, which is kind of interrupting my point of trying to insist it's actually good, like formalistically on its own terms. And it's not just a Docky Huey thing. So maybe I'll abandon that and go back to the interview. When we remind him how much his music means to so many people, Murray gets a little teary. I mean, it actually makes me feel really emotional. That is a very touching thing to be told. I don't want to be phony. I don't want to put on any false humility, but it's a lovely thing you're telling me. When I started writing music on Doctor Who, there was quite a lot of criticism of it being too emotional or, whatever. That's all fine. I don't mind that. People have lots of different tastes. But I feel like over the years, it did sort of spread around and people connected to my music, like that episode with Martha when she whispered something in everybody's ear and it spread around the world to defeat the Master. Like that.
So the episode that made you drop the show, Neo. His fondest moments.
Series 3, great music. I'm never complaining about that. It might have had his best music of all in This Is Gallifrey, which is another one of his mega iconic, just gorgeous compositions. The last time Doctor Who magazine met Murray in person was in Cardiff for the read-through for the 60th anniversary specials. It was May 2022. Murray says, when I walked in, they were playing my music. Donna's theme was on. Honestly, I was made up. I felt, they do want me back. I did shed a little tear. It just really got to me. And there was a wooden TARDIS with my name on. I was like having that. I felt like Eddie Murphy in Trading Places. You don't have to steal it. This is yours. And David was there and Russell and it felt like coming home.
Oh,
Yeah, he clearly wanted to leave, didn't he? I do remember in 2017 all the stuff where people were trying to, and he never said any of this, and people were trying to say, well, he's wanted to leave because he's old and, he's gotten tired and his work on the show is depreciated and he's not as good as he used to be and he's worn out. Like, what the fuck are you listening to? No, he's not. His music's gotten better as he's gone on. He's gotten more energized in lots of ways. Just people shoving all these words into his mouths. And it irked me so much in 2017 when I was saying, what are you talking about? There's no interview where he's saying the things you're saying he said. So all these many years later, in a petty way, I feel vindicated and happy that, that wasn't the case and people were just putting claptrap in his mouth.
And of course, once you left Doctor Who, the fabulous Sagan Akinola took over the job as composer. Have you had a chance to kind of have a listen to some of his music and his interpretation of the show?
No, I mean, I was living in America and I've only just come back, and I have not seen Doctor Who since
really?
the last episode
Oh wow!
I worked on, so I have no idea. I haven't.
Just for clarity, the interview you're hearing right now is from February 2021, and the big Doctor Who magazine interview we're mainly going through right now is from April 2023.
Somehow the universe has kept it from jumping into my living room. I've not heard the theme. I have not heard a single piece. I've got kids who are too young to watch Doctor Who, and and we don't actually have TV on very much.
Of course.
So I have no idea.
Yeah.
My one regret, says Murray, when I had kids was that they'd never get to see me working on Doctor Who. I thought, well, that's a shame because they would have enjoyed that. Cut to 5 years later, me stealing a TARDIS off a table so I can come home and present it as a trophy. It's now 11 months since that read-through. What episode is Gold scoring now? Or can't he say? Murray says, I can say whatever I want and you can choose what to put in. So I've done Special 1 and Special 3. I haven't done a single note of Special 2, and I've been sent a bunch of other scripts. Those are scripts for Shooty's Series 14.
Yay.
And he says, Russell has been putting music and musical environments into these scripts in some really interesting, exhilarating ways. In Russell's words, knowing that Murray's music will take it to the next level.
I was just saying, mentioning exhilarating ways that musical environments might be incorporated. Could that be alluding to a possible musical episode? That's something people have been speculating about recently.
Russell owes us one,
Yeah.
Because half of ABBA presented him with an idea for a Torchwood musical, and per the writer's tale, he seems to have kind of shrugged it off. I resent Russell forever for doing that. He owes us a musical, if not in Torchwood, in Doctor Who. So, yeah, we're owed one.
As soon as Jinx Monsoon was cast, we just decided, musical episode. Like, that's the expectation here.
Obviously, helps that she's got piano keys on her costume. Like, it's kind of leaning that way, isn't it?
And Russell's talked about wanting to do different things with the show. Now he's back on it. I feel it in the air. I feel it in the earth.
Like, Russell and Moffat definitely made use of him, with a lot of musical moments, like Daleks in Manhattan with the devil.
Tallulah.
Yeah. My Angel Put the Devil in Me.
Love Don't Roam, Song for 10.
Abigail's Song.
He's done like a Kafka musical with David Tennant for the radio, which is not like a musical. Like, it's not music all the way through or anything, but there are musical aspects to it. It's this weird kind of meta musical that Murray wrote. Like, Murray wrote that. So he's not just a score, like, incidental composer. He can do this sort of thing as well. Russell talking about what he can do. I love what I'm about to read out. So this is from Russell. When Russell knew that he was returning to Doctor Who, quote, I think Murray was the second person I phoned. First Bad Wolf, second Murray. It was unthinkable that we'd ask anyone else to write the music. Murray just fits. It's hard to explain. I quite like not explaining it, to be honest. He just gets my writing, kind of ineffably. He understands a script way beyond the page. He just understands the whole reason why the script exists.
I was just going to say, I get it. Yeah. But with Moffat too. Like,
yeah,
he just gets their personalities and he just embodies it in musical form.
All the stuff we're saying here, like, I think his music was even better with Moffat. So this isn't even his final form, or this Davis-Murray connection we're talking about. Was Russell confident that Murray would say yes? Actually, no. Russell quote, Doctor Who is a very emotional thing for us all, and I was wary that he'd think it was wrong to return. Life has changed, he's got a family now. Maybe he'd moved on. And sometimes people are just busy. Murray wasn't able to score Bob and Rose all those years ago, 2001, because he had too much to work on. Though it was scored then by Martin Phipps, who was amazing, so good. I once heard a cover version of Bob and Rose in a sauna. But you can never take anything for granted, and I was so delighted when Murray said yes, as was the orchestra. I went to one of their recordings and they were all so delighted to be back. When did Russell probably realise how loved Murray's Doctor Who music is? Russell, I think it was when University Challenge had a round asking the teams to identify the Doctor Who companion by their theme tune.
Wow.
Cool.
I love that Murray was called so early and that it was unthinkable to... it's
Yes, it is vindicating of the idea that RTD and Gold kind of go together hand in hand, don't they? If you're getting RTD back, like you just, yeah. It would feel like a knockoff if anyone other than Gold was doing RTD's new Doctor Who. Like, just no.
Others doing anything it is. Like, that's why when Nolly was scored by Blair Mowat, I like Blair Mowat, so I was like, oh, this will be interesting. And I did like the score for Nolly, but it was also kind of like, we're in a weird Bob and Rose scenario now. Like, why is it's an RTD show? Where's Gold? Where's Gold? He's always done them.
One thing that I think Russell said in that quote you just read out, that Gold instinctively understands like the reason why a script exists. And I would say maybe in the case of a certain showrunner scripts, it might be very difficult for anyone to work out why they exist. And that might explain some features of the scores for those episodes. But that's not really pertinent to Davies or Moffat. So maybe it's not so relevant.
I don't think it's just a cheap shot because, like, we were talking about John Williams and the Star Wars sequels earlier. John Williams, is obviously like he's the son. He's an absolutely extraordinary composer. Getting him back, no matter his age, to do more Star Wars, he's going to do incredible work. Yeah. None of this is his fault. But the thing is, J.J. Abrams in 2015 is not making a film the way that Lucas made them in for the prequels or for the original films. We've got a lot of, it's not beat, but we've got a lot of cut. And things are very, 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 very pacey in those sorts of films now, especially Star Wars films. Films, they're zipping along. And the thing with the original films and the prequel films is there's lots of times where things just stay, and we just stay on the atmosphere, we just stay on the landscape, we just stay on a character's face for a while. And I think part of this is just the actual filmmaking itself of how Lucas makes films and how films were made further back. And I think part of this is also Lucas saying, John, do your thing. This is your moment now. I'm resting. Like, you think of the Force theme where, we first properly heard that, and that's Luke looking at the two suns. It's not, even to get a scene where, Luke goes and putzes around outside for a moment, that's not advancing the plot at all. But it's a huge moment, for the character of Luke and for the story itself and for the atmosphere and everything. And so the music gets to swirl up and do all these sorts of things. For like the newer films and like the newer Star Wars films, for example, where's the time to do that? There's not much time. I think this is why we didn't get that much new music that was huge in the way the Force theme did. There was that nice moment in The Force Awakens, like Rey is exploring the Star Destroyer and she's, zipping around on the sand. And so we do have some time and we do get that nice kind of Harry Potterish, magic-y theme for Rey. There's not many other times, I think, in those three films where I think Rian Johnson's a fantastic director and everything, but everything's just so zippy that there's not a lot of time where the music can just stop and rest and kind of swell up and say, I'm in charge here, Chibnall's Doctor Who, I think, does a similar thing where we advance so quickly through a lot of moments. We think of the storytelling priorities aren't to dwell. I think of, in Spyfall 2, go back and watch how quickly we go from Gallifrey's destruction to the next bit, to the next bit, to the next bit of that episode. There's no time to do a This Is Gallifrey thing. There's no time. Look at when the Doctor's mum dies, there's no time for music or for anything there. And by the time we move into the next episode, it's Plot City and we're doing all sorts of things. There's no time for Sagan to really... Even when Sagan does, an incredible bit of music, there's often not time for the show to really show it off. I'm thinking of like It Takes You Away there. Like the show was getting written and kind of filmed in a different way in Chibnall's era that I think was less conductive to the music coming out and swelling and kind of owning the show than it was in the Moffat and Russell eras, which is also kind of a factor. This is my little soapbox. It annoys me a lot, the editing of films thrusting down the music these days.
No, yeah, I totally agree. Like, we just want to luxuriate in the music, and yeah, don't be afraid of letting it lead, because I don't think you're going to lose people's attentions, as long as it's good.
No, look at Game of Thrones at these moments where it would just kind of stop and, Rob is just going to be really angry for a moment and we're going to have the Stark theme play. And it's fireworks for people. People love that. It's just, you've got to, I think, it's almost like a letting go of the reins a little thing to say, we're pulling back on the pacing. That's very scary. But, we're just pushing the emotions of the moment instead. I know it's a big thing. And especially these days, all the analytics, we've got to have... I was reading an interview the other day about that new Chris Evans movie I'll never watch. And originally, the Dexter Fletcher, the director, wanted to do this big, interesting homage to some, other work at the start and have this whole interesting scene to open the film. And he was told, well, no, you need action within the first 30 seconds. Otherwise, some people are going to switch off. And so he had to do something else instead, especially these days where there's all that data. I think music is going to get even more squashed because, we need a new thing. We need a new thing. People are going to switch off. People are going to switch off. So, yeah, I think it's a real, yeah.
That very thing even happened with Doctor Who. Russell was saying the Series 14 opening, they got notes from Disney, redo it. But Russell also, I don't think he has to take those notes. So maybe in this instance, he agreed,
Well, speaking of the 60ths, Murray says people started saying, we really need to speak to Murray. There was a director, Mark Tonderai. We know him from Ghost Monument and Rosa. Murray was like, what can Mark, possibly want? And then Ben Chessel, who's directing episode 2, this was January 26th, and he says, I'm directing this episode, and it seems to have a lot of music in it. Have you looked at it? Then another director and another. Then it started to dawn on me. There's an awful lot of music in this series, isn't there, Murray? I was speaking to myself now, not realizing, of course, that my consciousness is just a fantasy. And apparently Russell had entrusted all of it to me. And actually, that's quite an honor. I love that man. The magazine talks about their, incredibly long relationship and, all the work they've done together.
It's like as time's gone on and, there's been a big break and we've had time to reflect on Murray Gold and think, wow, he was really, such a huge part of the show's identity. So I guess it makes sense for him to come back and now they're giving him even more and, really fully making use of his talents, I guess.
The way he's talking there as well about music mounting up and realizing, there's actually quite a lot of music I'm going to be doing for this reminds me of how he talked about the other time he had to start doing music for a new Russell T Davies era of Doctor Who.
And you've scored for 3 different Doctors as well. Is it fun coming up with the Doctor themes, the individual Doctor themes each time?
Well, nobody knew, I suppose, that it was going to have leitmotif or thematic music through it right at the very beginning. It was Jadoon's just arrived, look. There's a Jadoon, isn't it? I know. What was I saying? I have no idea. Oh yeah, nobody knew at the time. Well, we didn't know. Oh God, we didn't know that the Doctors would have music themes. I mean, and there was a piece of music that played over Rose, and then it seemed to work later on for Rose. Same with the Christopher Eccleston's music at the beginning, which was a sort of Time Lord-y thing. It became his music, and then I suppose I consciously wrote. He's been following me all day. Then I consciously wrote one for David Tennant, and then for Matt's, I knew that we wanted. I mean, it's absolutely, where is Matt's theme? What is going to be the bit that defines him? And that was important, especially with the change of kind of showrunners and everything like that. Is let's make this as distinctive as possible.
I don't think I ever knew it was going to be so much music. Just got the first episode and did that, and then did the second episode, and it slowly dawned on me that they were going to want music all the way through. So by the time I got to the end of the first series, I'd written quite a lot.
I didn't even know there were 13 episodes. I just got through episode 1, and then they said there's, and then there's another one, and then there's another one, and then there's another one, and then there's another one. And it was like, I don't think I ever asked any one single thing about what the show would entail or what, beyond that initial meeting with Russell and Julie. The rest of the direction the advice I got was minimal. But that episode did have all of the themes in it, that all of the main themes were in that episode that finished up in the 13th episode. So they all stayed through it. I just went about it in the exact same way that I would any other drama, as in treat these characters sincerely.
Murray makes his own kind of assessment of Russell here, which I think is interesting. He says Russell doesn't like sitting on his laurels. With It's a Sin, honestly, I think he was embraced by the younger generation. And let's face it, the younger generation hasn't always loved everything that boomers stand for. Watching the love that Russell received off the back of that show, I think that made Russell feel like he wanted to give something back to them, and that's found its way into new Doctor Who.
Ooh, that's exciting.
That's interesting, isn't it? That's not go to the bins. That's I want to make this for you.
Did they actually say boomers in the article?
Yeah. That's Murray said that. Yeah.
I think you can kind of see that just how 15 and Ruby have been cast for one thing, but also presented, and how the two stars kind of conduct themselves on social media and stuff. The upcoming series feels very, very in tune with, I guess, like younger audiences, like younger viewers.
In 2005, some fans, Ben Cook is writing, used to the lower key electronica and otherworldly experimental tones of classic Who. These fans were suspicious of Murray's big, colourful, adrenaline-fused tunes. Suddenly, Doctor Who was interspersing synth pop with guitar rock and orchestral pomp in what Murray once described to Doctor Who magazine as a maximalism. But Murray's rousing melodies and musical dexterity and sheer gusto soon won over the naysayers, most of them anyway. Generation Xers, born in the heat of the show's 20th century run, and old-school traditionalists who preferred radiophonics became 24-carat Murray Gold converts. That's the thing about Murray's music. It's joyous and irresistible. I don't know if that's quite true. I still see people moan.
I would say they are a minority, the moaners.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I definitely see online, even back in the 2000s. I don't know if it was a problem with his music in itself, but I guess it became sort of like the scapegoat for their issues with the show. Because I think his show, he can do that kind of classic style synthy stuff.
Oh, yeah.
He did that cool thing in Sleep No More, the Morpheus song.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah.
You know, he's perfectly capable of that. But yeah, he's going for that maximalism. And so is Russell. Like, that's what the tone of the show is, and how the pacing is, and how it's propelling forward constantly is. I guess that the music being so loud and in your face, it kind of becomes that kind of lightning rod for all the criticism.
Yeah, people who hate Gold tend to also basically hate New Who, like as a whole, I find.
Yeah.
Murray says, I use music to try and bring people up, lift people's spirits. When I write music, I'm nearly always trying to cheer myself up. In terms of elation, spirit lifting, communicating with the infinite, music has this ability to speak directly to that thing inside us that's all sad and soft and vulnerable. This is why I love music. Then it talks about Murray's life a little bit. Talks about one of his very early memories is watching The Green Death and what he remembers from that. Talks about, how much he listened to Dudley Simpson, scored TV back in the day. But he's specifically complimentary of the great woman behind Doctor Who's music, Julia Derbyshire, saying she's a genius. Her version of the theme is a piece of electronic art. Ben Cook asks Murray what's he got planned for the Doctor Who theme this time around. Murray says, I think, probably you're expecting a version that spins on Russell's favourite iteration of the theme. I'm sure if you delve through Russell's interviews, you'll be able to find which one that is, or which ones. And the article goes on to say, a while back, Russell hinted that he wanted the 2006 theme tune, but bigger with more piano.
Oh.
Ben Cook mentions this to Murray, whose eyes widen as he reaches for a pencil. Oh, I'm glad you told me, he says, pretending to make notes. Must rewrite theme. That's it. Yup, you've got it rumbled. That's just Murray teasing away. Something that's not a laughing matter is the absence of the Series 10 soundtrack. I think some people have forgotten the Series 9 soundtrack didn't come out until the Chibnall era. So that one took a while. It took a long while.
I had to get an alternate cover, actually, with the Series 9 logo on it, because I was annoyed.
Yeah.
The Series 10 soundtrack is been irritatingly absent for a very long time. And soundtracks aren't like, when if you have a video game installed on your computer that you can actually go and root around in the files and get out the music, like you can get the tracks out from there. They might not be in the format that works for you, but you can actually get the music out of it.
NPC1.org or something.
Yeah. That's like a film and TV soundtrack isn't that. It's not rips of the music from the show. It's its own kind of arrangements. It's its own re-recordings a lot of the time. It's its own kind of bespoke thing. So, the question was, has that been done for Series 10 and then not released? Or has that not happened at all? Does the soundtrack still need to get made? And there's been obscurity over what's actually going on there. And so Murray's asked about this. Is it the missing CD? Murray cuts in when he senses what Ben Cook is asking him. And he laughs. Anything I say in answer to that question is not going to be adequate, is it?
No.
I don't know what happened, says Murray, shaking his head. But it is out there somewhere.
He was spurned. Chibnall didn't hire him back, and he decided he hates Doctor Who.
Does that answer your question? Murray says.
No.
It
doesn't.
How long after this interview do we think it'll be before the inevitable Murray Gold is returning to Doctor Who before the Series 10 soundtrack release tweet? 2 hours, says Murray, maybe 3. Look, it will come out. That's an exclusive. The Series 10 album will see the light of day by hook or by crook.
Good. I think Series 9 was actually worth the wait, because that was very expensive.
The fact that it took until Gold actually came back for him to actually get this interview and say that outright, it doesn't feel coincidental, to be honest. I'm not going to outright say that he was withholding it out of some sort of spite for Chib, but it just feels like the two things feel related. His return and us finally getting the Series 10 album confirmed in existence, at least, even if it's not out yet.
We have a Liverpool Legions aspect to this interview, because you might have seen on Twitter part of this little bit of the interview about the Series 10 soundtrack repeated, where you will see the bit. I excised a bit of this when I read this out to you two. You would have seen it on a tweet saying, I don't know what happened. Well, all those world events happened, but it is out there somewhere. Now that sounds like Murray's blaming COVID, doesn't it?
Well, or the war in Ukraine or something like that. Doesn't really make sense.
The thing is, it's not good to tweet that bit out in isolation, because there's a vital bit of context that's been removed for that world events things. What's happened is, Ben Cook is saying to Murray, we've had 2 British monarchs, 4 prime ministers, at least 5 Spider-Man movies since Series 10 aired. This has happened and that has happened and this has happened. The Walking Dead has ended, running up that hill has become a UK #1, blah, 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 blah. He's saying all these things have happened. And then Murray answers, I don't know what happened. Well, all those world events happened.
Oh, right.
So he's not blaming COVID. He's not saying, this pandemic that happened 3 years after I left.
He's ripping back on a Ben Cook's joke. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's your little puncturing of the lesion aspect there. This is what happens when the Doctor Who magazine pre-release thing happens, when people tweet out bits of it. What Murray then says about the main theme is, what I would say is we might be talking about more than one main theme. I don't see why it can't be a different one every week.
Cool. I like that. I hope he follows through with it.
I mean, that's, again, it's like what we were saying about him being trusted with even more and using his talents, I guess. Being more playful with that kind of thing. It's like the next evolution, I guess. Yeah, so I do wonder, maybe we'll get some kind of more 2005-y thing for maybe like the first special, or...
Like, it doesn't need to be like a full staged, totally different staging. Like, it's not like necessarily 8 or 8, 9, 10, 11 different bits of music full on, because you could do a modular sort of thing. Like, I've talked to someone about how the Arrested Development Season 4 like kind of peppers in different instrumentation depending on whose character's episode it is, which is like you're still the baseline, same bit of music, but then there's just a saxophone bit added over a certain episode, or there's an electric guitar added over a certain episode. It could be like a modular thing. Still kind of one main theme, but we change a bit of it.
Gold literally did that, didn't he? He added the electric guitar in Before the Flood, right? So there is precedent.
So it's possible, but he could go the whole way out and do actual loads of completely different ones. Who knows? The interview goes on, and Murray's just analysing the different characterizations of the new Who Doctors that he scored for. He's asked what can be expected of the 14th Doctor, and Murray says, Tennant steps straight back into that character as if he never left it, with, I suppose, an added aura of what the hell am I doing here? As a character, I mean, because this is the question mark that sort of threads the episodes together.
Right, so this a mini storm in a teacup over this one again, confirming that 14 is in fact just 10, and Gatwa is the real 14th Doctor, and it's all been confirmed and vindicated yet again.
They'll say, I've got some Doctor Who collection Blu-rays where they send me out another disc later because they're saying, oh, we screwed up this disc, we didn't put the right thing on it. Do you think for all the toys calling Tennant the 14th Doctor, eventually I'm going to get like a little sticker in the mail saying, no, actually he's 10.3 or something? Is there a correction going to be issued by the BBC?
It's all part of the plan. It's all part of the plan to get the minority of people who care about numbering. It's all just to get us a bit confused and to pull the rug out from under us.
Murray's asked about musical callbacks for the 60th episodes. Murray says, it's inevitable that you're going to get the odd reminiscence. For example, there's a little bit of Donna's theme as soon as we hear her in the first episode. There's a bit of the Doctor's theme in there too, but they're not old recordings. All the music that I've done so far is brand new, even when it's evoking an older theme. Then I think for Shooty, it's important that the music feels brand new. From what I've seen of Shooty, he's dazzling, he dazzles immediately. He also radiates this tremendous warmth. He's got a gravitational pull that's powerful.
I wonder if 15's eventual theme is going to feel kind of like Bill's, or like the kind of music we got for Bill. I just feel like there might be like similarities in terms of like their character, or even in their fashion sense in some ways.
A warm, like a big warm kind of hug of a theme. Yeah, maybe.
In fact, do you remember that stripy top that Bill wore, like the vertical stripes? Now, we've seen 15 wearing something kind of similar, haven't we?
Yeah.
Here's more the band is getting back together. The orchestra that Sagan ended up using eventually wasn't the orchestra that worked with Murray previously, which is the BBC National Orchestra of Wales. So they're back. Of course, they're back. Murray says, I've already done 2 days with them. They're fantastic. So they've been working together since the Christmas Invasion, which was the first episode of New Who with orchestra. Because for Series 1, that's all synthesized. Or that orchestra you hear. That's not an actual orchestra in the flesh.
And then I got this email very close to the time when it had to be finished. Like, it was October. And the dub was in November. And it just said, I'm doing this thing, I don't know how it'll work out, but I should have asked you this months ago. Do you want to do the music for Doctor Who? And I was like, I just wrote back, yes, that would be great, thanks. And that... So then I had to go down to set and see things happening. And I made this, I made this tape, and I studied everything, and I made this incredibly electronic thing. And then I went and played it to Russell and Julie. And I think right at the end, after about 7.5 minutes of electronic stuff, there was this string chord, and they goes, oh, we like that. And I was like, okay, I think what you're telling me is you want strings. And they said, yes. And I said, well, we don't have any budget for any strings or anything like that, and you need the music. And then they said, well, just what's that? That sounds good. That's nice. I was like, yeah, okay, well, I'll do that then. And then I had to go and change my computer because I was using a computer program called Cubase. And I had to go and buy these fake strings, and I had to plug them in using a software program I didn't know how to use. And then 2 weeks later, I had to deliver the score. And and none of it's got any reverb on it or anything like that, because I didn't realise that you should put reverb on string samples, otherwise, because they don't sound very realistic. And that was broadcast.
And so for 12 years, the BBC National Orchestra of Wales orchestrated away with Murray. And they'd missed it, says Murray. They really want to do the show, and you can tell I was thrilled to be back. I was on the train to Cardiff for the first recording session on 16 January, and I sort of thought, will it be the same? Will anyone remember? Will we be greeted warmly? When I arrived at the Millennium Centre, where the orchestra is based, this lad on security just looked at me and said, "Oh, it's so good to have you back, Mr. Gold." I said, "Are you kidding?" He said, "We really missed you." I said, "Thank you so much. I don't think anything that happens today can top that." Then I walked in and the orchestra started clapping. It was the loveliest thing. There was a tremendous feeling of warmth in the room, and it's the same in every room on this whole damn show. Everyone just seems to love it, and they give it their everything. So yes, it is. It's good to be back.
How evil of RTD to do this, to bring all this happiness into the world. The monster.
I obviously he's telling the truth, but it just reads so storybook that someone to go, "It's so good to have you back, sir," and then to walk into the room and everyone started clapping. I just think it's very sweet, but it's also very funny.
And then a bald eagle flies in.
It reminds me of the Five-ish Doctors. Peter Davison walking in is like, "Oh, you were always my favourite."
Yeah.
Even the fact it's the Millennium Center, like it's iconic part of Torchwood and series 1 of Doctor Who. It all feels very special. Any lingering thoughts on that before I go on to the next thing?
I'm good.
I'm good, yeah.
Okay, what I want to ask of you two is, we've talked about our overall thoughts on Murray being back. We've talked about Murray's thoughts on Murray being back. We talked a little bit in passing of some of his music. We talked about, the Series 8 finale music, blending some 11 and 12 stuff. I want to hear some tracks you like in particular. What are some tracks we specifically like of Murray's, whether they're the big popular ones or less known ones? What's a track you like of Murray's that you want to talk about for a little bit?
I have sort of sometimes there are little bits of a track that will really take over my brain for a while. One that I absolutely adore is in A Christmas Carol. There's a scene where it was a really great scene where the Doctor's in the past with young Kazran, and he's trying to figure out how to get the vault door open, the door to this vault, and he quickly hops into the future to hear the code from the much older Kazran, played by Michael Gambon, and he pops back into the past to use the code on the door and open it up, and it's all very clever. And there's this bit of music going on in the background, and it's called the overall track on the soundtrack is called "I Can't Save Her." And about halfway through, there's this bit that kicks in where the woodwinds kind of kick in, and it starts swelling like ocean waves, and it's just absolutely incredibly atmospheric and gorgeous. It's unbelievable. It's so good. I've listened to that little clip just so many times, and it's such a great the fact it plays at that point in the narrative where the script is playing all kinds of tricks and really drawing you into this world as the Doctor kind of hops back and forth to kind of bring the young Kazran on this adventure and kind of solve these puzzles in these really clever ways, and of course underpinned by the urgency of trying to save the shark that's going to die because this episode is bonkers. I think that's just a moment of total brilliance from him. I really love that bit. Do you want me to just go through all of mine?
Yeah. Keep going.
Another one I think is underrated, from Series 6. There are quite a few songs from Series 6 which form key points in the whole River Song story. There's a really famous theme, Melody Pond, from the end of Good Man Goes to War. That's reprised a lot. That's really famous. I find an episode which has some bits that I go overlooked slightly is Let's Kill Hitler, which, as much as that is widely derided for being such a bonkers episode, such a weird point in the story, deciding to do a farcical rom-com with Hitler and all kinds of things. Gold really, he really pushed the boat out for that episode. He carries Series 6 in a lot of ways. But one moment in Let's Kill Hitler, when the Doctor's dying and stuff, and River makes the decision to actually save him, use her regenerations, do all of this, because she realises that she is actually destined to be this woman, Riversong, who is so adored by the Doctor and by everyone. The music that plays there is called The Enigma of Riversong, and it's not the main River theme from that series, but it is, again, it is really gorgeous. It starts with these kind of overlapping strings, and then it goes through it kind of marches and builds up in the middle, and then finally, once she actually starts pouring her regeneration into him, and it forms this fountain of light in the air, there's this fantastic kind of explosion. It really bubbles up. I think something Gold said in that interview earlier. He said about how music touches the bit of you that makes you feel soft and vulnerable and emotional, and I think this is a great example of that. His music does that a lot. One more thing. Well, I've got a couple more things actually. I think one kind of curiosity that I really like in Series 7A, the first half in particular, is how the bass line from the new theme for the Daleks that he uses in Asylum of the Daleks, that was completely, I did not find the note there. But the way that bass line kind of comes back in a completely different way later on in the Song of Amy and Rory.
Yeah.
That we start hearing in Angels Take Manhattan. Because it's two completely different things, like the Daleks on one side and like Amy and Rory's loving relationship and marriage on the other hand. Not exactly related, but the way that this is threaded through is quite interesting because in Asylum of the Daleks, of course, it climaxes with that maybe less than widely revered scene where like Amy and Rory kind of heal their divorce by like getting together again and stuff. But the fact that that's linked in with the Daleks, an episode about the Daleks, kind of provides the pretext for bringing that theme back in a totally different way later, in a much more romantic way. And also, I love both of those themes on their own too. I like the simplicity of it, the fact that it's basically just two notes, which I cannot produce with my throat right now, but the way that it alternates and it has this strange simmering tension to it is really clever.
In the liner notes for Series 7, Murray says, when you know you are going to lose a companion, you sort of build up to it from the beginning of the series. Musically, Amy and Rory's bass jump scene was bedded in near the opening of Asylum of the Daleks. So that was his thinking with that.
Right. Perfect, of course. Yeah, perfect example of how, like, of why that was there, how that works. It's just really good.
Because going into Series 7, like, at the time, we all knew that Amy and Rory were leaving. So we had that on our mind from the very beginning. So it was really cool to have that with the music as well, I guess. I
think the last thing I have to say for my little list, obviously there are lots of favourites and stuff from like Series 5 and stuff I haven't mentioned, but just one more thing I wanted to bring attention to is probably a big one, an obvious one, but the track Fear from the episode Listen. This is a really beautiful string melody that just kind of sums up the kind of optimistic, just like really compassionate, warm feeling of that episode. It's just so beautiful.
The thing I love about Fear from Listen is that it kind of sounds wrong in some ways. There's this weird kind of tension to it that it's kind of off kilter in some ways. It doesn't just feel sad. It doesn't just feel pretty. There's bits of it that feel kind of almost harsh in a certain way. I really like that. It feels very affecting. Deal, what are some tracks you like a lot?
There's too many. I think a lot of mine are very Russell T Davies era focused, even though I do think the quality just goes right up with the Capaldi era. But like some iconic tracks in the Davies era, from series 3 as well, when the first kind of level up that we get. I really love the bow theme, if you remember that one. That one's just really beautiful. And really like encapsulates that kind of era. Like when I think of like David Tennant's Doctor, his first Doctor, I just think of that, even though it's Bo's theme. I think of like the romanticism and how bittersweet and just kind of mawkish, but in that, beautiful Murray Gold way. I really love A Dazzling End, which...
Yeah, the Donna Turn Left song.
That's another one that, it's not really played that much in the show, but it feels, again, just very emblematic of that character and that time, that period of time Series 4 came out in, I guess. And I really love Amy in the TARDIS as well.
Yeah.
Which is from Series 5. That was like just such an exciting time watching the 11th hour. And this is like the first big piece where I realized, wow, the music's really changed and it's gone like with this completely new aesthetic for Doctor Who.
That track, is that the one that's got that great goldism in that? Like it goes kind of into I'm the Doctor in the second half and we get that typical gold thing of all like the downstroked acoustic guitar, like palm muted kind of dun 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 dun. Is that Amy in the TARDIS that does that? I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
You couldn't encapsulate the feeling of a new era better than that to me, Like it made me realize what gold can really do with Doctor Who. Like any doubts about him coming back for Stephen Moffat, which I never had, but any doubts anyone had, I'm sure people would think, okay, he's really versatile.
Yeah. Did you have any others?
Missy's theme.
Oh, Missy's theme from Series 8 is so good, isn't it?
Just the creepy backwards. Again, that just felt so different and
Yeah, if I had any more that I was going to mention, I would just a similar vein to Missy's theme, the River of Tears from Series 5.
Yeah.
With the kind of backwards, reverse, sort of lifting and rising, and like just another bit of wonderful and manipulation from him.
Oh, yeah.
I got one from each series, and they're all pretty different, because this is my thing with Murray, is he's not just, I think, the way people kind of flanderize him. And I get that, yes, I'm the Doctor was played a lot, and sometimes it was like the same exact track, like literally the same track, not a new interpretation, played a lot in Matt's era. But he's done so many different things over the course of the era, and I think we really exaggerate, or people really exaggerate, the obvious of some of the music. And he can do different things, and he does do different things. A lot of characters have more than one theme. People act like Amy only has one theme, or 11 only has one theme, and they don't even. You know, there's so much music that's actually there.
I've got this one in my head right now. What's the one? I think it's when the Pandora Crew opens, maybe. It goes like, da-da, da-da, da-da-da.
That's Amy's adult theme. She has a separate child theme as well. Yeah, there's all sorts of music going on.
It's just so much put thought. Again, it's like how in tune he is with the writing and the characters' theme plots.
For the Capaldi era, there's 3 tracks I thought of. For Series 8, there's one I love called Aristotle, We Have Been Hit, which is from the opening of Into the Dalek. And it's one of these big moments where you go, this ain't your grandma's Doctor Who.
Yeah.
This isn't the Matt era again. We're in a whole new musical landscape. It's this explosion of like...
Although in some ways it was your grandma's Doctor Who, because it was literally evoking classic with those synths, wasn't it, in some ways?
So those twinkly, dangerous sounding synths. It's like oscillating and...
Yeah, it's this explosion of arpeggiated synths as, you know, we're getting kind of space opera, you know, fights on the screen. And it's just the music is... It's part of that electronic approach of the... it's kind of funny that we started off in Series 1, you know, using a digital way to do like an orchestra. And then we kind of come around a different way by the Capaldi era, where we're not trying to be an orchestra, we're trying to do like specifically electronic things with the music now. And yeah, I think just that set out a whole new kind of musical realm for what a lot of the Capaldi era will be doing, which is this much more synth-led electronic approach.
I guess that goes hand in hand with how in the Moffat era, I guess they got more confident with harkening back to classic Who, you know, often literally with, you know, flashbacks and yeah, so going back to that kind of more synthy style, but also, you know, making it very goldish. Something I loved in Series 9, and there's a lot of variations of this. I Call Myself Me, I'm a Shieldier, Madame Mare is Me's theme, a Shieldier's theme, which it's very, very hummable. It's a very strong motif. It's very easy to get into your head. It's very strong in all those sorts of ways. But it's also not one note. It's not just the same thing. It has all these different sections it develops through, and it has all these different instrumentations it develops through. One of the early versions of it sounds like a Zelda song to me. And then, you know, there's versions which are more very brassy and more combat-y. And then later on, by the time of Madame Mare, it's this kind of sadder, more singular kind of thing. And it's like it's reflecting how Me and Shielder has evolved over the series and how she's changed.
just a great example of we have this really strong bit of music we can interpret in a lot of different ways, and this can reflect the character. It's kind of a microcosm for what Gold does with, the Doctor's themes and the show in general. And it's just a very hummable bit of music as well.
Just to add something to that whole thing about me and Ashilda, I think it's the fact that Gold is writing an enormous amount on top of the enormous amount of writing that's already there. He is writing something that is dense, and in a way he is actually able to add to and contribute to the interpretation and the mediation of these characters. Like, he's writing, in a way, he's writing his own version of the show almost, that is interwoven with the show that is already there.
Yeah.
So they have this dense interplay and this dense relationship, and that's how he enhances the show so much. It's why I said something like he carries Series 6 earlier, because the reprise of motifs and the development of them is its own kind of storytelling that is just as sophisticated as the storytelling going on the screen.
For Series 10, I don't have a name for this track. How could I? There's no soundtrack. But you'll know the music I'm talking about. From the end of The Doctor Falls, when we wrap back around to the start of World Enough in Time, and we have I Will Not Change. Hasn't that plays very interestingly with what we're talking about, I suppose. Capaldi buries his fists into the snow. He's refusing to change. And the music that starts there, where it's kind of this swelling.
Yeah.
And then the snow is all around, and we start getting this very wispy, magical sort of noise as David Bradley, starts walking in. No, the whole thing's ridiculous. He starts walking in.
Yeah.
The music sounds absolutely... We go from this very emotional bit with 12 to this very wispy, magical, and it's really reflecting the kind of incursion of this is... I don't even know if this is good or bad that we're using David Bradley here, but this is a huge move. And it's a huge attempt at magic, at movie magic, to bring the First Doctor in some way into the show.
Yeah.
The music's really trying to reflect that. But the really interesting thing there is that I'm pretty sure, I've listened a lot, and it could be a coincidence or it could be an unconscious thing, but I think the music in that scene is riffing on, or, kind of using some of the track called The New Doctor from Edmund's Butt from Adventure in Space and Time, which is kind of like the main theme of that film, or like Bradley's character in that film. Which is like this really fascinating kind of intertextual example, if that's what Gold was going for there. Because, it's almost like canonizing like a docudrama like in the show. It's saying this very interesting, strange thing about like Bradley's presence. And I think it's just unconsciously, if your brain is kind of receiving, that's the music from Adventure in Space and Time. I just think that's firing off such interesting connections, in your head, and it sounds so magical in its own right. I just think it's such an interesting musical moment that's happening there, and I knew you guys would recognize the moment I was talking about, because that wispy bit especially is really, really memorable.
I completely buy that Gold could be referencing the Adventure in Space and Time soundtrack. because I think, when you've got like the bringing of Bradley from the docudrama into the main show, that in itself is such a strange thing. As a composer, you have to respond to that somehow, don't you? Like, it's such an obvious thing to grab at.
Like, it's basically like essential viewing for the actual show, I guess. The way it was marketed, and they brought they had Matt Smith film footage for it.
All those three Capaldi examples are totally different instrumentations. So that's from one era alone.
Yeah.
Then I look at Matt's era, and we get even more different types of music that's doing totally different types of things. In Series 5, Words Win Wars is this huge, brass, immense declaration of, part of, Eleven's, main theme that's being declared there. The thing is, that music is so effective and so dramatic that I think it's been flanderized in a way that's really interestingly keyed into the scene itself, where that scene itself is this huge bit of dramatic irony where like Eleven is swanning around and, he's saying all these big impressive things that then we're going to push at David Bradley and everyone else to act out our cons.
Yeah.
But it's like he's being trolled. He fails.
Total failure.
Yeah. That's
exactly what it is. And so the music is playing with that because the music is so immensely, it's almost kind of hilariously epic, and dun 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 dun. It's like this huge. It's the most epic, ridiculous kind of version you could make of that theme of Eleven's there. But it's so good, that's the issue with Gold is he's so good at doing that kind of that epic version that I think it's really played into the misinterpretation of that scene, and it's this kind of really funny, dramatic irony that we associate that scene with success, and even though the whole point is it's not with success, I think because the music is so spellbinding and it's such a declaration that you feel like, yes, this isn't it. This is the coolest speech ever. I'm so engulfed in it. I think that's just Murray working so in tandem with the scene to kind of have you feeling like Eleven's feeling in that moment that, this is working and I'm the man, who the man, in kind of in that moment. I think that's really, really cool how the music works there.
Yeah.
From Series 6, that's possibly his best soundtrack. I know a lot of people think so. There's so much good music in that season. So I wanted to go for a kind of lesser talked about one in there, which is from The Girl Who Waited, called 36 Years. And it's this kind of jazzy version of that Amy theme. The Life and Death of Amy Pond is the big version of that. You remember when Auton Rory shoots Amy and then we get it? It's like this jazzy, slow, kind of simpler, sparser. It feels like an aged version of that theme to me. And that, reflects the kind of awkwardness of love we're getting in that part of that episode with the older Amy, seeing Rory again and everything. I think that's just a great example of how we can use that existing repertoire and change it up in ways to reflect what's going on in the episode, to reflect, the relationship between Rory and the older Amy. This very different kind of version of that Amy theme, I think reflects that so well, and it's such an interesting version to play with there. So that's musical storytelling, and it just sounds fantastic itself. It's a great jazzy version of Amy's theme. It's great. In Series 7, I'm not going for the obvious episode there, which of course is, the more diegetic Rings of Akaten, which has absolutely fantastic music. But what really interests me musically in that series is I really don't like the name of the Doctor. I don't like that finale much. I didn't like the last finale before that either. But There's a moment in that finale which is just absolutely killer. And it's actually a bit weird how killer it is, because it almost tonally feels weird within the episode, because it's like, because Murray and Matt are kind of on one wavelength there, which is really intense, which is the scene where 11 like learns about Trenzalore.
Yeah.
And he sits down and he just completely breaks down. And what's going on there with the music is it's this kind of interpretation of the This Is Gallifrey nostalgia theme. In the liner notes for Series 7, Murray says, if there was ever any doubt how much Matt Smith will be missed when he leaves Doctor Who, watch The Name of the Doctor. He's brilliant. His ability to shift between moods and tones is mesmerising. We recorded the orchestra in Cardiff, and a few days later viola and coranglays at Ayr for the very intimate, tragic moments around the talk of the Doctor's grave. Please don't make the Doctor go to Trenzalore again this year. Please. And then if we wind the clock back to Series 3, where that theme originated, in the liner notes for Series 3, Murray says, for This Is Gallifrey, the destroyed planet of Gallifrey, home of the Time Lords, and the nostalgia for that lost home was a theme featured throughout the series. This melody was intended to portray that yearning, the loss, and the anger. Now, in Series 3, This Is Gallifrey is like extraordinarily epic, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like this, it's awesome. Like, it's one of his best bits of music, I think. And it's one of his, very loved, iconic pieces. And it's a very, very, very 10th Doctor thing. That piece of music, isn't it? It's, my feelings, I'm feeling my feelings. It's
Lots of little phases in that song, and it sweeps through them. Yeah, it's really nice.
It's very melodramatic, and it earns that because it is, the big emotions. Partly we've earned that from the 9th Doctor. That's why we care about Gallifrey so much in this kind of status quo.
Yeah.
But it's very, very big. I'm feeling big emotions, kind of the Series 3 version of it.
Yeah.
The Series 7 version of it is this really, I think it's this, I know Murray's talked about being maximalist. He talked about in that interview, but A Secret He Will Take to His Grave, the Series 7 version of that, is like the Philip Glass take on This Is Gallifrey. It's like this minimalist version that is incredibly repetitive. And often it's like, we got the piano here and we're just repeating this over and over and over, and we're not varying it much beyond just slightly increasing it in volume as we go. So it's this entirely kind of new take on those feelings of This Is Gallifrey. Now it's this kind of more mature, mournful kind of resignation and recognition of death and age. And I think that it's placed so interestingly with how that theme was originally conceived for Tennant, and how he's going the opposite direction of his maximalism and is doing this Philip Glass thing with it instead. How that plays when Matt's acting in that scene. It's just this, it's this very encompassing moment, but not in the way that Murray often is encompassing. Not in this huge, I'm yelling my emotions at you, brass, do your thing kind of way. It's kind of the opposite of that. It's, this music, and listen to how I'm doing this music now. It's different, isn't it? I think
he's bookending, isn't it? Because you've got Gallifrey and Trenzalore on opposite ends of the Doctor's life, supposedly. He's born on Gallifrey, dies on Trenzalore. So it's like we're coming full circle.
Yeah.
As soon as you said Philip Glass, I realised which one you meant. Because it kind of builds in that same way. Was it Pruitt, Igo?
Yeah. From Koyanis Kotsi, yeah.
Yes.
It's also just so sad, that music.
Yeah.
And it's not like sad in the series 2 way of like, where we're making you like feel this way.
Yeah.
It's sad, and this is depressing. It's not sad and Rose, I love you. It's not sad in that way. It's sad and you've just got really bad news and you're just kind of sitting back and going, well, shit, this sucks. It's sad in kind of that way. And it feels much more real and sad to me for that it's not the 10th Doctor's huge like soap opera, big emotions. I love that. I'm not saying that's bad, but it's this thing that Matt can sell so well, which is kind of the quieter, I hate that this is happening.
Yeah.
Which is sad in a different way. It's not, no, this isn't happening. It's, I am upset that this is happening. It's just Murray and Matt and Moffat or the M men there. I did something extraordinary. But Tenet. I'm not ragging on Tenet's first run. There was great music there as well. For series 4, a bit of music I absolutely love is Hanging on the Tablophone,
Yeah.
which is used in the finale, especially in the scenes where the children of time are trying to do the subwave thing to connect to contact the Doctor. And it's just this, it's very unique instrumentation. It really, nothing else really sounds like that in Murray's work. We got these crazy synths. We've got this hoo-ha, like male voices in the background. We've got the tabla, of course. We've got electric guitar going on. It's just this huge, very unique to the series 4 finale because it's only used there. It's just extraordinary sense of urgency, and it just plays so much into that finale, which is like everything is happening at once and everything is so exciting and everyone's here and everything's going on. It's just so exciting. And that music just sells that so extraordinarily well in such a unique instrumentation. I just think it's a really exciting bit of music. It's a really fabulous bit of music, and it's very short, but it's very recognizable. That's just gorgeous, that piece.
Yeah, that made me think we've not even mentioned Westminster Bridge. The first thing we hear sounds got this 60s-ish energy. It's just very exciting.
That's the thing. When we're trying to talk about the lesser known ones a bit, it just feels so like inherent that the big ones are the big ones, and they're so incredibly interesting. For series 3, there's so much big music in that series, the stuff in the human nature episodes and stuff in the finale, and all the strange creatures. So I wanted to go for something completely different to those that I think is really, really cool and it's really great storytelling, which is Gridlocked Cassinis, which is in Gridlock, and it's kind of riffing off Muzak and elevator music. It's this very jazzy thing, and there's like electric organ in it. In the liner notes, Murray says, for a pair of ladies not in their first flush and marooned in endless traffic, the partners Cassini were a remarkably sprightly duo. Gridlock portrayed a world composed of remains and had different styles of music to represent this. The Cassinis were firmly in the detective tradition. What I love is kind of the Muzak vibes of that, a part of the extraordinary world building of that episode. It's a single episode, and it's not a super long one like we got in later eras. It's a regular length episode, and so much world building is accomplished in that episode. That setting is, one of the great settings of New Who. And I think a lot of that is, Davis' script, and part of that is Murray's music, which, immediately kind of sells so many of the things, we understand going on there. And I think the kind of music he's doing with that track is a big contributor to that. And it's a really just interesting bit of music as well. For series 2, this is one of the cases where maybe I am using one of the big ones instead of a lesser known one. The Impossible Planet it's mostly this lone viola kind of screeching out. And it's So that gives you all like the associations with Westerns, American Westerns and the frontier. It's very sparse until like halfway through and we start getting the piano dripping in. Kind of oscillates between feeling very foreboding and like scared and lonely, and then also feeling like I can do this, like we're on the frontier and we're forging ahead. And so it's kind of capturing all these different kind of complexities of that setting and that episode. It feels like a real musical representation of empty space and the promise of exploration and kind of the knife's edge and trepidation of like exploration. And the bit at the very start sounds like a lament, but then we get into this haunting like solo viola thing, and it's you guys can hear it in your heads, I'm absolutely sure, because it's this very recognizable bit of music, and I think it just tells a lot of the story, and it really contributes to the weird vibe and kind of scary vibe and unique vibe of that episode. I think it's a really good bit of music. The last track I wanted to talk about comes from Series 1, so the days where there was no orchestra. That was all Murray fiddling around with, synthesizing that. In ways that weren't always the most orthodox ways. Look at the use or lack of use of reverb with the orchestra there. It's a very unique soundtrack, Series 1's.
Yeah.
And a track there that I think is it's one of those tracks where Gold is the most important player in this scene in lots of ways, which is saying a lot because what Eccleston is doing there is huge. And this is the scene where, no, I said no, I'm coming to get you. And so the music that starts there is so in sync with how we as the audience feel when the Ninth Doctor is like standing up and saying no to the Daleks when, they've got Rose. He's refusing them. And we're totally in like the Ninth Doctor's sudden like rebellion and defiance against them. And the music just keeps rising and rising and rising. This really powerful like male choir, and I feel like the scene is drawing most of its energy and power from Murray there, and Murray's like perfectly synthesizing in with Eccleston's performance. There's this kind of sense of wonder to the music. It's like this promise. It's almost this empty promise. Like, how can he possibly achieve this? But it feels believable as the music keeps swelling and swelling and rising and rising and rising continually. And then we have an allusion to the weakest link theme in it as we go, which ties into what that episode is. And it's just doing so much, and it's rising, it's rising, it's rising. And I think it's one of those bits of music that just absolutely engulfs you, and it's doing the storytelling in that scene. Can you imagine that scene without music, or with, kind of atmospheric music instead? It would just be something completely and utterly different and lesser, I think.
Yeah, it would feel awkward, I think, without that like, massive climb of a soundtrack in that scene.
Murray says, I will say it now, the end of episode 12 of the first series is my favourite moment of television. Well, can I say ever? I'm just not sure I remember anything that's given me more of a kick than Eccleston rounding on the Daleks and boasting how he would come and rescue Rose. It was brilliant, passionate entertainment that made the heart race. Just the sort of thing a composer loves to receive through his letterbox. I think my heart races, when I rewatch that now. I've seen that a million times, but it's just, and I think that obviously Eccleston's doing a lot. He's doing tons there, but I think it really is the music to me that's like the really key player in that scene that, it sells it to you that this could be happening, what Eccleston is saying, and it sells it to you how big a move that is for the character to do that there. It's just extraordinary and encompassing.
It highlights how crucial music is because it moves the scene even if nothing on the screen is moving at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a scene having muscles or like a heartbeat, like racing underneath like everything else that's going on. So it just, it can be incredibly important.
Speaking of the episode as well, I love that moment when that music you were talking about comes in. Like, it's just so sudden, the way he stands up and everyone looks at him. And there's another moment, I think, that makes me think of in The Parting of the Ways. One of my favourite scenes in Doctor Who ever, when the hologram appears.
Yeah.
And Rose is being sent back. That music is just like... It makes me tear up like every time. And it's just such this perfect moment where it defies like emotional logic, because it's that moment where the Doctor turns and looks at Rose, and in the back of your mind, like, well, how would that work? Like, how does he know she's standing there? But it just works. It's such a great moment, like, because it's defying that logic kind of thing. Like, it's just running purely on the emotions of the scene.
He never feels like he's second-guessing himself musically, does he? He really, believes in what he's doing.
It's so confident, and it just really hits for me every time. Literally every time. I've seen it at least 20 times at this point. 25 times.
I think we're about wrapped up on the actual Murray Gold part of our discussion today. There's two last little straggling thoughts or clips I want to bring up before we move on to all the other coverage we're going to look at. The first is, Gig mentioned Abigail's song earlier, and just from Gold's mouth, there's a funny little backstory to the story behind that song.
One of the unusual things about the Christmas Carol episode is that music is also part of the narrative, in a sense.
Right.
You've got Catherine Jenkins as a guest star in the programme, and she sings in it, but she sings in it for a reason.
Right.
It's written into the script.
Yeah.
There's a song to be sung in it.
I hadn't read the script, actually. It had been sitting in my inbox. Well, I don't have an inbox, but you know what I mean. And Beth, previous exec producer, had said, have you read the script, Murray? And I said, yeah, it's great. Fantastic. What a script. And she said, so have you done the song? And I said, there's a song? And she said, yes, you know that bit towards the end where somebody sings and saves the entire universe, and because they've been let out of their prison for one day, which the person who's been in love with them for all their life, and it turned him into a really miserable bastard, has been in, and he releases her for one day, and she sings to him, and it's going to be one of those kind of iconic moments on British television. I was like, oh, that song.
No pressure whatsoever.
And then she said, well, Catherine Jenkins is flying in from Russia on Friday. And I was like, which Friday? She said, as in, now is Wednesday, tomorrow is Thursday, and the next day is Friday. And I was like, fantastic.
And also, I just think I like a little circularity thing to end our Murray discussion before we move on to all the other stuff. We're going to talk about Doomsday and director interviews and all sorts of other RTD and whatnot things. Just the fact that the whole motivic and thematic kind of music approach we've been talking about, just how that kind of evolved in the first place, I just think is a sort of interesting thing to look back on before we move on to the rest of our discussion today.
The whole series started to be thematically driven musically from episode 1. And because that happened in the first series, it just seemed obvious that it would have to happen in the second series. So as soon as Christopher left and David Tennant took over in series 2, he announced himself in the Christmas Invasion, and he said, I'm a fighting doctor. So his music became dun 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 dun, and all became very swashbuckling. And then Matt came along, and he seemed like really like all wobbly and sort of funny and a bit eccentric and sweet, so he became that. Nobody ever asked for there to be character themes. It just seemed, as Series 1 was developing, there was a little tune for the Doctor, and then by episode 2 there was a little tune that seemed to be about Rose, and then it seemed like if those two characters were going to have themes, it seemed a shame to leave everybody else out. It does sometimes create a problem when I've run out of music and I need to use, and this piece of music fits exactly in a place but it's not that character. I'm like, oh God, will anyone notice? Yes, they will, of course they will. Well, how can I suggest that they're connected? And I cheat.
Is that a good spot to stop talking about Murray? After all the specific reasons, we think he's great and we think he can do all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to some other stuff then. In Doctor Who Mag 590, Russell has his letter as always, and he says something I want to get the take of you two on. He says, what to say when? When to release information? In what order? For you, I mean, faithful reader. The plan is to keep a constant bristle of information without giving the audience too much, but without them thinking we've vanished. Because these are the tricky days right now. We've had the initial rush of excitement, and come the summer with Comic-Con, maybe, perhaps not a promise, and then the BBC's autumn schedule, the heat will begin to intensify. Slowly but surely, we'll be everywhere. That's the hope. But now, April, May, June, tricky months. Maybe we have to idle a little, but not stop. There is a plan, a real proper detailed plan. A lot of work's gone into it. Vanessa Hamilton, director, commercial brand development, Doctor Who and scripted, fact fans, has slaved over a mighty Bible with Joanna Allen from BBC Publicity and the team. Oh, it's epic. It's cross-referenced with colours and everything. The document is so vast, listing the potential release of every actor, director, composer, writer, designer, and monster that I quail before its might. The other day I asked, when are we announcing Jinx? It's in the document, came the answer. Yeah, you get the idea. Huge document, huge plan, trust the plan. Surprises can happen sometimes. He talks about how an episode title was set in Star Trek Picard recently. But, basically there's a huge plan, and some of the plan will work, some of it might not work, but there's a huge, huge plan, and we're trying to think how we're going to keep the drip working of information, trust the plan. What do you think of all that?
He's always been great at keeping the show sort of alive and keeping the hype maintained. It's always been really fun to be a fan during his era,
Yeah, it strikes me that the slightly off-kilter thing about the current period is that the thing that's actually being promoted is the 60th, because that's what we get, that little glitchy teaser thing. But the thing that's actually continuously feeding us with new surprises and delights is Series 14, which involves completely different Doctor, completely different companion, a completely different... it feels like we're an era ahead of the current era, even though it's really like having two at the same time. Sometimes it starts to feel a bit like the 60th. It's like, that's all right, but I want to get to Series 14. Even though I am really excited for the 60th, it just feels like a separate thing already. It almost feels like it's in the past, even though it's in the future. It's quite surreal at times.
In that sense, I think it's really good that they've shown Ncuti in the 60th trailer, somehow he's going to be part of it. And it doesn't just feel like a stopgap thing. It's like, there's something here that's building towards the future, I think.
Some other recent news is the 60s episode of Series 14. We've seen the outfits. They've been gleefully shared, officially. We've got loads of official photos of Ruby and 15 in their 60s outfits in that episode. How did that go over with everyone?
Quite well, I'd say.
Why did people like that so much? I mean, I liked it too. I loved it. It's fantastic. Why did I like it so much? Why does everyone like it so much?
I would say it's a mixture of them looking good and also looking camp in a way that's kind of elegant. I'd say it's the show consciously having fun with what it can do and how it can present the characters. You've got Ncuti with sideburns and his afro kind of poofed up a little bit. I think it's playing with style in a way that is very overt and conscious, and it's fashion that draws attention to itself. So I think there's a lot of appeal for like the queer audience as well, just in terms of how they're serving, they're slaying, as you could say. And I think it's a mixture of that, and of course how charismatic the leads are as well. So I think there's a lot to be excited about, enjoy in the idea of the show presenting itself in this consciously charming, kind of retro-influenced way.
We always like it when they dress up.
Yeah.
I love the afro, because it's like, well, where did that even come from, Is the Doctor wearing a wig? Is he going to do some regeneration gag where he grows it out himself, or will they just not mention it?
It makes me wonder if they're like in some sort of like a sort of fictitious, not fictitious, but like a made up construct realm where like everyone's in different like outfits and stuff. So maybe it's I don't want to say an illusion, but like somehow they're in different genre and it's changed their look accordingly.
Yeah. I'm so excited for that episode. I think that's going to be a killer. That's going to be really good. Yeah. It's nice when you see photo. What I really love is this kind of symbiosis of the leaked photos happen, and then there's not like scram, it's not that. It's here you go. Like, here's your prize. You got them. Here's the real photos. It's so fun for the fandom to get that. We've seen a little shot. Are they wearing what I think they're wearing? And then here's, a dozen actual legit great photos. I think that's so cool to play it that way. It's so confident as well.
Really took that for granted from 2005 to 2017. Even Series 10, we were getting like, we're gonna see the Mondasian Cybermen on the streets. Well, they're gonna release an actual, promo picture that they prepared on that night. Like it all felt very planned. Whereas in the Chibnall era, it always seemed like, we're not meant to be seeing this stuff that's on set, and usually there was nothing really that exciting that got fans really talking, And maybe the Jadoon, I think we saw the Cybermen leaked, but it's like we weren't allowed to see those, They weren't inviting us in.
Yeah, you saw the Cybermen in a really grotty, low-quality picture, just a little shock of silver in some fuzzy, like, green background.
Yeah, so I'm very excited for that. Also, Jinx was also announced to be joining as a major role in Series 14, Jinx Monsoon. So that's also captured a lot of people's energies and imaginations, and a lot of people are super into that. So Russell is he's a big mind when it comes to casting. I think he's very invested in casting. I don't know how to describe this. It's a compliment. It's like his finger is on the pulse, I think, with casting, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think Jinx Monsoon is an extremely savvy casting, because this isn't just any Drag Race star. This is like a real like superstar, just with like just the entire. Just a huge portion of like certainly the Western like gay community, like the queer community, and just like huge amounts of love and adoration surrounding this person. Like not for just like their kind of repeat performances on like a very famous like reality TV show, but also just having an illustrious career in like the stage and like all kinds of things. So just super like really big performer, and just instant connection with a massive fan base of people who wouldn't care about Doctor Who, but will now actually come in and watch this and be really engaged with it, because this person they absolutely fucking love is like straight in there in a major role. RTD is just connecting with exactly the audience he needs to connect with for this new era of Doctor Who. These are exactly the kind of people who could so easily get into Doctor Who, because Doctor Who is so, especially under RTD, it is so attuned to their sensibilities. It is so fucking gay so much of the time, Doctor Who, honestly. It's all the ridiculous camp costumes, all the antics, and you've got a Doctor and companion like Gatwa and Gibson who are just so dripping in like slayness. Like it's just so good.
Yeah, I agree. I love when Doctor Who brings in people that aren't. I love when we use the regular stable of UK actors, because so many of them are so good, and they tend to love being on the show and everything. Like that's all great, but I love when we kind of go beyond that and we cast someone who, or we even get a writer who you might not think would do Doctor Who, or you wouldn't really think of putting into Doctor Who. I always love that, because that's what that's the joy of the show. Bring in anything, electrify it, put anything in there, because it's always going to work and it's always going to be interesting. So and it's going to, welcome people in. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. In Doctor Who Mag 589, there's a good interview with all the directors of Tennant's 3 episodes of the 14th Doctor that I hadn't seen much talk on. And there was some really interesting bits in there. So the directors of the 3 episodes are, of course, Rachel Taylor is doing the first one, and we adore her because just phenomenal. What she did with Doctor Who. I haven't seen much of her other work. I know you guys would have seen her Sherlock, and she's done a lot of like superhero stuff as well. Well, not just Tank Girl the film, but like The Flash and stuff, and Supergirl over in America. But just her Doctor Who work is beyond. So for her to be back is extraordinarily good. It's super.
The fact that she did the last episode of Moffat's run, and she's doing the first episode of RTD2, it feels symbolic doesn't she? She left and came straight back.
She and Murray Gold, you know.
Yeah, true. And Murray Gold as well, of course.
The director of the second special for the 14th Doctor is a Welshman called Tom Kingsley, who's, done... He's worked on Ghosts, that sitcom that's like the ghosts of people. He's worked on that a lot. He's done, some other BBC work, book adaptations and stuff like that. Where I'd heard of him, I didn't recognize the name, but when I was looking him up after his announcement, I realized, I do know something he did, is... this isn't a, fun story. Chris Langham from The Thick of It?
Yeah.
Was that the pedo or...
Yes.
Oh.
I know what you're going to say.
Tom Kingsley, was one of the directors of Chris Langham's Comeback, which is the comeback film he did, which was this low budget film, made for £25,000. It's a black comedy about, accusations of murder and stuff like that. And, it was the first thing Chris Langham did since he was convicted on child pornography charges. And Tom Kingsley had defended, working with Chris Langham and stuff in interviews. And so that's where I found out, I did know of this guy because I remember reading up about that film.
Oh, dear God.
So that's where I know Tom Kingsley doing this second special. Third special is being done by Chanya Button, who had a varied career. So she's been an AD, an assistant director on Harry Potter films, and she's directed a black comedy herself called Burn, Burn, Burn. She's done some other works. I guess big TV work. She worked on The Spanish Princess, which I had heard of, which is this big history, big genre show that Stars, the American network, did. So varied career, also pretty young, like Tom Kingsley. So we got Rachel Talalay, who is give her everything because she does Doctor Who so brilliantly. Then we've got these two younger people doing the second and third 14th Doctor specials. They have some interesting things to say in this interview they all did with Doctor Who magazine. So I'm not at all reading out most of this. I'm just reading out little bits of it that I thought were interesting. So Rachel Talalay is asked, she said, the magazine says, according to Russell in Doctor Who magazine, they, Russell's team, threw themselves at Talalay and begged Talalay to come back. And Talalay says, well, they didn't have to work very hard, although I did make them work a little bit because I had another offer, a very large offer at the same time. Mm. So I wonder what that was. There's no way we can know, but that is intriguing. Then Tom Kingsley is, this is so, everything just gets more and more bizarre with this guy. Doctor Who magazine says to Tom Kingsley, this is your debut on Doctor Who, a program you first discovered via 1993's John Pertwee radio drama, The Paradise of Death. I'm not sure anyone's ever said that before. And Tom Kingsley says, yeah, when I was growing up, my parents didn't let us watch TV, but we used to listen to cassettes of sitcoms and stuff like that on long car journeys. And that's where I first heard Doctor Who. It was an interesting way to encounter it because you just had to imagine what it looked like. The mag says, so is your whole television career a kind of long revenge against your parents? And he says, I think it might be. It's cheaper than therapy. That is the most bizarre. I've heard of people getting into the show through Alien Bodies, but through The Paradise of Death? Wow.
I mean, if he was raised on cassettes of sitcoms, that would explain why sitcoms are so close to his heart. He felt the need to dearly defend someone from one of them.
Tom has also asked, what was your reaction to the scripts for RTD2? So remember, he's doing Special 2, which we've heard some rumors about as being a weird episode. I don't know if there's anything to that. But Tom says, I kind of got to the end of it and thought, well, I pity whoever has to direct that because it's an absolute nightmare. I was planning to email my agent the next day and say, it's amazing, but no way. But when I woke up the next morning, I was still thinking about it and I started to figure out, well, how could you actually do this? Because a lot of my episode is quite weird. Even at the read-through, Rachel, your episode went down so well, and I was really jealous of you getting to direct it because there are so many complicated stage directions in mine. The reaction in the room was a bit like, sorry, what? Which made me think it was going to be a disaster. But of course, when you come to film it, it's actually really cool. It's got a lot of similarities with two of my favorite films, Aliens and The Thing. It's a little bit of the DNA of those mixed in with Doctor Who.
Makes me think claustrophobic, I guess.
Something chasing people around, maybe a monster skulking around on the floor.
Yeah. Interestingly, Murray Gold said he's not written a piece of that yet.
Of Special 2, yeah.
He left it till last because it was too ambitious.
Or maybe it just needs to be something completely different. I don't know.
On the first episode, Rachel says, I read all 3, and my first reaction was wow. The first one is classic Family Who. It's bringing back that world that Russell left with David and Catherine. And then after that, it becomes much more expansive, with Russell really throwing his massive imagination at it, while also being thoughtful about setting up the next series.
Ooh.
When Rachel says the next series, do we mean series 14? Or do we mean, I've seen a lot of unit in the trailers for the 60th. Tom Kingsley says each special has a really different flavour. It feels like Russell flexing his muscles and showing all the different things Who can do.
I like the thought of RTD sort of openly going for a challenge in terms of writing stuff. Because when you get a writer challenging themselves, that's when you get good stuff like Listen and Extremis and Heaven Sent. So.
Rachel says, my episode features lots of people and lots of scenes. There's soldiers, there's battles, and I thought, I haven't always succeeded in doing the action stuff with loads of extras that well in the past. This is really scary for me. So I was determined to do that part really, really well. It's all about embracing the stuff that scares you. That's literally what you were just saying, Gig. She agrees with you.
Yeah, cool.
Chanya says, it was just the most expansive thing I've ever read. Every page I turned, it was a different world and a different idea and a different sort of bonkers and inspiring adventure. It was just the ultimate luxury to read it and go, this is a writer at the very peak of his abilities, completely unbound and confident in what he's putting on the page, which as a director is really empowering. It's challenging in the most positive way possible for someone to go, here's a big idea, let's see how you do it.
I think that notion of RTD unchained, I think for the same reason that Gold coming back is exciting, I think RTD is obviously, we've already talked about this, like I don't need to gush anymore about how appealing the prospect of RTD, like going all out with this completely like unbound canvas is.
Something Chanya, the director of the third episode, says that's interesting is she's talking about working with Catherine Tate. And she says Catherine really connects with the history and the backstory of her character. I was so impressed by her recall of the emotional beats that the Doctor and Donna had from their first run together. Both of them, that's David as well, have such command of their characters, their ability to live in them and instinctively know what's right for them. They were working hard, but it never looked like an effort. Tom Kingsley on that note says something interesting. He says, they're so good together and they know those characters so well. It was just a delight. Occasionally, I'd need to give them a little nudge in one direction, and half the time that would be all good, and half the time, David might be like, Tom, I'll absolutely try it, but I'm not actually sure the Doctor would do that. He knows what he's doing, David, but he's also very gracious and he'll try anything. He literally runs to the set in the morning. He's so confident, but in such a calm, friendly way, like he's just very happy to be there. He just seems like a man who's very settled and happy, and Catherine brings this extra cheeky energy to stuff, which is often just trying to make David laugh.
I think we're hearing a lot of Tennant knows that character so well. He stepped right back into that character. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, but no, 14 is definitely completely different Doctor though, like totally different. Yeah.
That character. No, we mean the Doctor in general. That's all we mean. Never be cruel, never be cowardly. That's all we're talking about. I love that it sounds like David is just this huge positive thing on set. Talalay talks about that more, just saying like David shows up and he's always sincerely happy and it just kind of energizes people. Sounds like a very good environment on the set. It makes me wonder back in like the trickier Series 1 days to Series 2, I wonder how much Tennant was part of maybe improving things, even if it was just morale. I get the impression he's a very lovely man on sets. This is quite interesting. Talalay's asked, well, who's your Doctor? Is it Capaldi or is it Tennant? Is Tennant giving Capaldi a run for his money? And Talalay says, are you asking me the question that would get me killed? And so instead she talks about the different approaches Capaldi and Tennant have to the role. Peter's a little bit more rehearsal oriented than David in terms of wanting to experiment more, to play with the lines more. Peter will give you 3 completely different takes on something. Whereas with David, once he settles on what he wants to do, what the Doctor would do, he's very consistent with it. I'd say that's the biggest point of difference, but it's joyous working with both of them. This bit about the TARDIS is interesting, about Wolf Studios and filming there. Talalay says, the first day she arrived, she had jet lag, and the first thing they did was put her in a virtual reality TARDIS. You put on the VR goggles and walk through the TARDIS like an amusement park ride, which is mind-blowing in itself. Then they took her on a tour of the stages, which were just huge, blah, 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 blah. Tom Kingsley also says I had a VR tour as well, but he kept breaking the VR thing.
Yeah, the fact that they've created like a virtual reality kind of representation of the TARDIS. I don't know if it was like finished at that point. It wouldn't have been, would it? Because I seem to remember Talalay said at some point that she didn't actually get to see the TARDIS until she was nearly done with her shoot. So presumably when she went in, saw it in VR, that was like a model, like a proof of, not a proof of concept, but like a demonstration of like how it was going to be realized. It's cool that technology lets people sort of walk around a set maybe even before it's been made, so for a chance to test how it will feel, maybe change bits of it if it maybe doesn't feel right to be inside. That's really cool. I'm loving the different kind of things they can bring to the production of the show now, like with Brad Wolfe.
Yeah,
that's so because it's embedded in your spatial imagination then, because your brain says, well, I've been there. Because you move your head and you, like, that's how your brain will receive it, like in VR. You've been to that place. So it'll start firing off their imaginations. It's just an excellent idea to do that. Talalay says, I was around for the 4 months watching the TARDIS being built. My DP and I were having all these conversations about how to light the wall roundels and things like that. But I just kept thinking, it will never be ready in time. So the fact that in the last couple of days of my contract, we finally got on there was amazing. Tom Kingsley says so much detail and love and thought has gone into the TARDIS. You can point the camera anywhere at it and it looks amazing. And Chania says, oh my gosh, it's enormous. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. It's sort of church-like in scale, and yet it's also this intimate space that takes you from one place to another to even larger, wider worlds.
Enormous and church-like is giving me TV movie vibes for some reason. Not even necessarily the console room. Like if you go to the other areas of the TV movie TARDIS, you've got like these stone columns and shit. I don't expect to see those in the new TARDIS, but the feeling of it just feeling massive and having an almost religious atmosphere to it. Those are quite exciting ideas. Also, the confirmed roundels, of course.
Yeah, I was trying to think like, so it's enormous, but it's also intimate. But I guess the TV movie TARDIS is that as well. It's very cozy, even though it's such a high ceiling. And
that I just salivate over the TV movie TARDIS. That's easily my favorite. It's just utterly gorgeous, just brilliant. Talalay and Chania are asked, do you feel Doctor Who is changing in this new era? Talalay says, I don't know if the ambition has changed, because the ambition of Doctor Who has always been to go above and beyond. But the whole approach definitely feels different. Definitely felt different. And Chania says, it's a generous, brilliant thing that Russell has returned to something he's already made such a success of. It's the mark of someone who truly has a lot of love and respect for the material. It's not really an answer, is it? That's
no, it's very unspecific.
But she didn't work on old Who, so
nonetheless, I think if you'll have seen any of RTD's old stuff and you get the chance to read new RTD scripts for Doctor Who in like 2022 or whenever, like that must be an experience. Like, I mean, you must be able to like read it and think like, wow, is this like how it felt in the old RTD years, or does this feel like something actually different? So I think there probably is an answer, and they're just not saying it.
That's all I had for the directors. Any thoughts on that before I move on to something else, starting with D?
I really appreciated that little interview they did. I think it's really cool to hear from them, and it's nice. It's good to tease the sense of what is being what it feels like, how they're making it. Because the thing about the 60th, it is the reintroduction of RTD2 in a way. It's like the opening salvo. I think as much as it's getting overlooked in favour of Gatwa at the moment, like the 60th it's going to be a big deal, because it is literally the first moment of a new era, and it's very strange for that to be a special, let alone an anniversary special. So it's going to be something quite unique.
Yeah. Something else quite unique is we're getting another transmedia project. The first was Time Lord Victorious, which was the thing, everyone understood it very intuitively. It was, I mean, there was a big poster that we had this key art of Rose in like a Greek outfit, and Eccleston was there, and Tennant was there, you know, and the Ood was there. Everyone was there.
And McGann was there.
And they weren't really there. I mean, McGann was there the most because he did a couple of audios. Tennant was in a few, well, Jacob Dudman did Tennant in an audio. Tennant was in kind of an audio, half an audio with McGann.
Yeah.
But mostly this was like in comics and novels. And it did actually have kind of like a strong premise in that, you know, when the 10th Doctor went crazy and vainglorious at the end of Waters of Mars, let's say he did that and he got so up himself, he went back in time and tried to stop death ever happening. And that made the whole universe go psycho. And so other doctors had to try and stop him. Like, that's great, which is kind of what the novels do. But there were also t-shirts and all these other things. And we've spoken about this with other things. But like, I think the issue was, much as like James Goss, who was like the mastermind of it, was saying, you don't have to just, it all works standalone-ish. You don't have to read this thing to read this thing. It'll work anyway. The comic will work this way. I think that's not how it got received at all. And I don't think that's just the audience's fault. If fault is even the word to use there. I think there was a lot of, just the landscape we're kind of in now, and kind of the wires being crossed and everything. That was very weird how people received Time Lord Victorious. And so we've got a new one of those, which is, there's no McGann or Eccleston or Ood or Rose.
Well, not yet, at least.
Or Tennant. Like, yeah, it's a totally new character called Doom, who's, well, we got this minisode to introduce her, which, she explains that, like, she's being pursued by literal death. So that's very Time Lord Victorious, which also had kind of personification of death. She's being pursued by death, and so she's got 24 hours, and like each hour, or a couple of hours, will be like a new story. So it's going to be more linear than Time Lord Victorious, and she'll meet a bunch of the Doctor's friends and enemies, and she's trying to get to the Doctor to like sort all this stuff out. So it's a new multi-platform story, for the 60th anniversary year. And the face of it, like the actor for Doom, is
Suze Kempner,
who's like this stand-up from the UK. And so she's playing an assassin who's been called Doom by her mother. And like Suze is very happy to be in Doctor Who. And so this is all going to be a big thing. And all the, there'll be comics and there'll be games and there'll be Big Finish and there'll be BBC Audio. And, we're all the hours are going to happen. There'll be novels. There'll be all sorts of stuff telling all this. And I've seen people saying, this looks so cheap for RTD. This looks like this for RTD2. This ain't RTD2. This is BBC Studios, like the same as Time Lord Victorious. In Scott Hancock's production notes in Doctor Who Mag 589, he talks about how on Friday the 24th of February, in London, James Page and the BBC Studios team conduct a special media shoot with Suze Kempner ahead of their Doctor Who Doomsday announcement. So that's not Bad Wolf. That's not RTD. That's not the team making Tennant and Shooty. This is kind of a separate kind of arm. This is BBC Studios, who don't make the show anymore, are doing this, working with all the licensees to make this sort of thing. I get the impression that this was in the works for ages, like Time Lord Victorious, and so it's kind of been grandfathered into the reign of RTD2, and RTD's promoted it because it's Doctor Who, but it's not his thing. This is like predating.
And yet, in spite of the fact that it's not to do with Bad Wolf or anything, you still get people who receive everything like it's one big blob. So I've seen people saying, oh my god, Doomsday has killed RTD2 already. Doomsday has ruined RTD2. It's over. Of course, these people are also insane and keep crying about casting trans actors and stuff as well. So insane people. But nonetheless, I think it's, as much as we can see if you're like a nerd and you're into like how this is all produced, you'll see how they're two separate strands. Nonetheless, I think a lot of the casual audience will sort of receive it as one big thing. Because, at the end of the day, it is one brand. Like, you can't help that, can you?
Yeah. Look, of course, there might be absolutely great stuff in here. Novels might be great. The audios might be great. Doom might be the super rich character in some of these stories. Like, absolutely, that all might happen. I think the minisode, formalistically, was tricky.
It's an interesting choice of word.
I'm not saying the word bad, but it looked extremely cheap. The costume looked cheap, and the filming was very cheap. The VFX were cheap.
The thing is, even like the cheapness of it, it was weirdly, it was too expensive for something so cheap. It has this whole like CGI kind of Doctor Who Velocity style background thing, but it also has a turning around to face the camera at different angles and changing the background, like to try and introduce more expensiveness to something that is cheap looking. It's really strange and oddly conceived on every level, from visuals to script. Like the way it's written is really strange. Like she doesn't quite feel entirely in character. She feels like she's reading out like a PR blurb for like the series rather than actually being in character talking to anyone in particular.
What was that phrasing?
Well, she's talking about like, oh, old friends, new enemy. She says something like that.
Who talks like that? That's copy.
Yeah, it's really strange. Yes. Very odd little. It doesn't feel like a mini-sode really. It just feels like an ad.
There's a scene in the American Office where the Gareth, the Dwight character, is trying to deceive the boss. I think he's been like off, basically cheating on him, like liaising with someone else, and he's trying to cover it up by saying he went to the dentist. And so the boss is trying to catch him off guard and say, "Oh, what was the dentist's name?" And he says Crentist, and the boss is like, "Really? Like your dentist's name was Crentist? Like, come on." And Dwight defends it by saying, well, maybe that's why he became a dentist. It's because his name destined him to do that. And I get that vibe from Doom when she says, blame my mother for my name. Maybe she's not a natural assassin at all, but she had an assassin-y name. And so she's kind of gone into the assassinating industry. Maybe I'm being charitable there, or maybe it is meant to be comedically pitched like that. I don't know. But
yeah.
The fact that you're having to kind of speculate about what this character's deal might be, and the fact that they're wanting to sell this whole range of products around this character that nobody knows, I think is a way in which the whole Doomsday thing, it feels slightly like one step forward, two steps back, or one step back, or whatever, because although it seems a lot less diffuse than Time Lord Victorious was, you've got a linear start and end, you've got one character anchoring the whole thing. It's not just this vague mass that people are wondering if they have to consume all of it or none of it or whatever, and then you've got a t-shirt. It feels more linear in that way, but the premise of it doesn't feel particularly keyed in to what Doctor Who, I don't know, consumers care that much about. Or it seems like, in terms of it inevitably being a vehicle for here Doom meets Missy, because they recently announced that comic, or here Doom meets, I don't know, some other characters. I think it doesn't feel like the spine of it is enormously strong as a hook at the moment.
Yeah. I love McGann, but McGann meets an assassin isn't I've listened to McGann more hours than I've lived, my life. It's you got to have. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I think it's much more smartly devised. I think the linearity of the hours thing is really smart. I think that was great. Whoever thought of doing that, probably James Goss. I'm assuming he's running this one like Time Lord Victorious. But it's just tricky because it's not a pre-existing character or it's not a pre-existing hook like the Time Lord Victorious thing. It kind of demands, I think, a stronger opening than the minisode was.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
So that is tricky. Just the staging of the turns to the camera, I'm confused by what was trying to be achieved there. Because the actual staging of them isn't working in a way that's natural. With how it's like this very theatrical, I'm turning and then we shift. It's like the timing of it is really off and it just draws the attention to the artifice of it. It's quite strange.
Yeah, there's no urgency considering the premise that she's going to die. There's no urgency to it at all.
It felt very primary school kind of theatre troupe traveling the country, visiting assemblies. It had that kind of vibe to it. And it's is this pitched at children?
I think it's just I think there was stumbling with that specific clip. I'm sure they'll have a bunch of people who know what they're doing at the licensees doing the actual novels and audios and whatnot. I assume this was just a kind of weird start, this minisode. But we will see. We will see. I just think the interest to me here is just this kind of tension that's still remaining, that there's still stuff that predates RTD that's going to channel through his era for a while. And that's interesting.
Yeah.
Especially because the whole thing with Disney is Doctor Who is money now. That's a really big part of the PR hook for the show now is Doctor Who is all this stuff now. And then you've got this, what looks very, very cheap, kind of stands in contrast to that. It's not going to matter at all when the episodes actually start airing. It's just a kind of interesting tension right now.
Yeah.
Speaking of RTD, okay, he's got an interesting story. In Doctor Who Mag 589, Russell T Davies has a bit of an interesting story. So he was writing this on Sunday, 19th of February, 2023. He says, "Do you know it's hard work on Doctor Who? Here I am on a Sunday afternoon and I'm stuck on scene 20 to 22 of Ep 8. Should that vital object stay in the ops room or get moved to the chamber? And I've done a rewrite on Ep 1, which includes the words Raw, Glastonbury, and Conquistador. And I've just sent notes on the third edit of Ep 4, including cutting the line, I once went to the top of the Shard. When, hold on, ping, an email from Julie Gardner. Disaster. I can't find any silver glitter body spray. Well, hold on, context. Julie's going to the BAFTAs because her husband and my lovely friend, Julian Howarth, has been nominated for Best Sound for Avatar: The Way of Water. And just to prove that all stories are Doctor Who stories, let me tell you, they first met on the set of Doctor Who, a workplace romance with Daleks. But now today, I say, this is ridiculous. I'm a gay man. Surely I can find silver glitter body spray. So I text my mate, Rob Keach, better known as Cardiff's finest drag queen, or the finest on a Tuesday afternoon, Dr. Beverly Ballcrusher. Where can Julie get silver glitter body spray on a Sunday afternoon in London? Now, just to prove that all stories are Doctor Who stories, Dr. Bev, despite having a name taken from Star Trek, The Poor Lost Soul, is vitally tied to the history of Doctor Who, We first met back in 2004. I've told this story before, but some of you weren't born, okay? Late one night, we were shooting the end of our very first episode, Rose, in the middle of Cardiff city centre. The Doctor, Rose and Mickey were lined up for that pivotal last scene, Rose's choice, to stay with Mickey or leave in the TARDIS with a mysterious traveller in time and space. High drama, huge moment, history, until the runner said to me, "Excuse me, they'd like you to pop into Minsky's." Oh, okay. We were filming right next to a gay club, so I potted inside wearing my anorak and good old analog headphones so I could still hear the dialogue being recorded outside as I walked in. The doorway's at the top of a long staircase. Dr. Bev is on stage. And yes, truly, faithful reader, she sings Star Maker from Fame to me as I walk slowly down the stairs. We meet, we hug, we hoot, we argue. I slap Bev, she slaps me, we kiss, we make sweet love, and then I went back outside. It's still one of my favourite nights on set. Filming, gay club, filming, with barely a blink in between. Anyway, today, help me, Dr. Bev, you're my only hope. Dr. Bev, like any drag queen, can solve every problem and suggests the Barry M range available in larger Boots or Superdrug. Other cosmetics are available, except obviously on this day they weren't. At the same time, the call has gone out. The gays can hear a woman in peril. Phil Collinson is out for lunch, and just to prove that all stories are Doctor Who stories, he's with Michelle Collins, the captain of the Pentalion from Chris Chibnall's 42. So the late Captain Catherine MacDonald comes to the rescue. Try Hamleys. Really? Yes. Or John Lewis. I say it's like we're in The Apprentice. And then in a climax to the tale, which I'd frankly rewrite because it's not really exciting enough, Team Drag defeats Team 42 because, yes, there's one pot, just one left of silver glitter and boots. Gel not spray, but what the hell, crisis averted, the Baptist can go ahead. Well, until 10 minutes before transmission when, hold on, ping, another email from Julie. Total jumpsuit malfunction. But there, faithful readers and drag queens, and the fascinating Venn diagram intersection between the two, I will spare your blushes and look away. The point is though, because all stories are Doctor Who stories, yes, life on Doctor Who is hard work, but sometimes it's an absolute hoot. P.S. He lost. I just thought that was a very RTD, big life full story.
I love when they're writing production notes and the showrunner makes the production notes column like its own piece of writing with its own recurring themes. Like in this one, RTD bringing back everything being a Doctor Who story. I think I love when they make whatever they're writing into poetry for no reason. They don't have to. They're just doing it because they compulsively have to turn whatever they're writing into a piece of poetry in some way, like into some kind of writerly experiment or exploratory thing. I mean, it's just a delight to have such a writer by nature writing for us so much, even things that aren't full episodes.
It's amazing to get that every month. Like, there's another thing we would take for granted.
I love also just going back to the moments that Rose was being made. It makes so much sense for now. Like we're R2D2's, still in its early days. It just feels like a nice link between the 20-ish years there. So yeah. Rewinding back the clock to the last Doctor Who magazine, I want to draw some stuff from 588. This is from the VFX coordinator of R2D2. They just make a little comment here I thought was interesting, which is, there's a lot of stuff about Meeps. Here. She's asked, what excites you about the future of the show visually? And she says, we're using top-of-the-range technology, the kind that Marvel films use, to make Doctor Who in Wales, which I think is pretty spectacular. It means Doctor Who is at the forefront of pushing the boundaries. And in the Christmas special, we're shooting with drones on the set, which no one's done before. Because of the way the Doctor races erratically around the TARDIS, it's amazing to have those sorts of shots.
Drone shots in the TARDIS, that does sound very cool. I think it seems like the kind of energy that they wanted to capture with like Matt a lot of the time, with him racing around like the console. So being able to do that in a really like visceral way with the camera, that's really exciting.
Yeah, that that's music to my ears. I can't wait to see this damn set and see how they filmed it. Something else from this issue, just another tiny little note I thought was interesting, comes from Scott Hancock's production diary. And he talks about, we've talked about the tone meetings Hancock has talked about before, but he talks about something different here. He's talking about Tuesday, the 3rd of January. And he says, the exec producers, the art department, and the script team get together for a methodology meeting. What's a methodology meeting? I hear you cry. We didn't know either. At first. It's completely new, an innovation where we sit down with a first draft script before any tone meetings are scheduled and talk through what the writer envisages long before any other department has input, so we get the original vision, sets, locations, monsters, stunts, special effects, we discuss it all. So I thought the emphasis on tone meetings we got earlier, was interesting that they talk about those as such a big deal. And now we've got something that's like even more than that. I'm getting prep and plan sound like really, really, really foundational, important things to RTD2. I mean, even look how much they've got in the can before it's even going to start getting aired.
Yeah.
I really get the sense that everyone being on the same page and everything being sorted before is the focus, which is interesting because you look at how RTD writes, and his chronic procrastination and stuff like that. It's just, I'm intrigued by how this is being run, this new era. It sounds very smooth.
When you think about how long New Who has been going on, it feels right that there should finally be some degree of getting your shit together and not having the production be complete chaos. It feels like it should be maturing in some ways by now. Like, we shouldn't be getting incidents like, there's too many to list, but like Orphan 55 or whatever, moments where things are just like falling apart and the costumes have to be redone and, the Sea Devil's mouths have to be digitally, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So it's very encouraging to hear that Bad Wolf & Co. are putting a huge amount of emphasis on getting everything together first and getting everyone on the same page as early in the process as possible and just coordinating everything with a great amount of preparation and care.
Yeah. Speaking of coordination, the last two things I have to talk about really are to do with the Sarah Jane adventures. And so what I'm about to pull from is RTD's letter, production notes letter for 588. So what happened was Sarah Jane Adventures went on iPlayer. Awesome. Sarah Jane Adventures is on iPlayer and everyone loves the Sarah Jane Adventures besides Tomtit. It's a very popular show. Everyone's going to love it. And it's all great. But wait, where is it? Where is the Curse of Clyde Langer? Where is the deepest, most impactful, most meaningful, most characterful episodes of the show? Where is the Curse of Clyde Langer? Why is it not there? And from there, many different theories sprang around. A lot of them said with utter confidence, it's not there because it's an error. It's just an error. It'll get fixed. It's not there because it's been cancelled. It's not there because, internationally it wasn't part of the right international packet. And it's just, it's nothing to do with politics. It's just with international distribution, blah, blah, blah. All these different answers flying around. But the dust settled and RTD flat out said what happened there exactly. So what happened was, firstly, RTD points out, when you put something on iPlayer, you can't put everything on iPlayer because of something called residuals. People get paid if their stuff is like being hosted on iPlayer. So every actor and writer gets a payment every time you watch a show, which RTD says is great and it's right, but that's why it's like not everything is on iPlayer all the time. But it's great that Sarah Jane Adventures is back, and I'll start quoting RTD now. Except for 2 episodes, a brilliant story called The Curse of Clyde Langer, written by Phil Ford, directed by Joss Agnew, was missing. None of us knew why, and no one in CBBC had realised either. The BBC is so multi-tentacled. It's hard sometimes for one arm to know what the other is doing. We're kind of busy, Emails flew. What the hell had happened to Clyde? Sarah Muller, the head of BBC Children's Commissioning and Acquisitions, sprang into action. She discovered that a complaint against the episodes had been upheld with the story marked as do not use.
Dun, dun.
Yeah. RTD says the complaint was absolutely valid. It concerned a totem pole ascribed to the Mojave in origin. In truth, the Mojave wouldn't have made totem poles like the ones seen on screen. Good point. And not Phil's fault at all. Those of us on the production team should have checked that out more diligently.
So did they end up like cutting it out and fixing it, or did they just leave it like in the ether forever?
Well, let's go on. So Russell says, but I love that story. I've always said it's one of the best stories we ever made in Cardiff. And I apologise for the inaccuracy, but what the story says about the homeless is huge and powerful and vital and true. So I said, could we re-edit? Ouch. Again, as a rule, that means money, and there's no budget for Sarah Jane Adventures anymore. But by a small miracle, it turned out the Doctor Who's post-production producer, Ceres Doyle, had been the original editor on that story. What are the chances? She's in her office right next door to me. I steal her biscuits. I hear her snore. So she leapt in to help. She ordered up the master files, complete with split tracks, worked in her spare time free of charge, and within 9 days, in December 2022, the incorrect material had been gently carved away, leaving the story still intact. The curse lives.
Man, that's a crazy story. The fact that like the editor happened to be there and was just convenient, was willing to just do basically unpaid extra work just for the sake of like this random episode of this kids show. I mean, it's just, I think it reflects the kind of community that exists around not just Who, but like the Who spin-offs and like the people who like put the work into it. I mean, it's really, really impressive. And like, it's a reminder of how lucky I think people who are into these shows often get with the kind of practitioners involved with it and just the amount of passion and care that goes in.
There's another controversy sort of to do with the Sarah Jane Adventures that we should talk about. So the cover of this issue, the cover of Doctor Who Mag 588, poor Canine is cut out of frame. We can't see his head. What a shame. Liz Sladen's there in a wedding dress because it's from her episodes that had the 10th Doctor in them. She's there. That's nice. She's up at like the top right of the frame. And then where we want him, we've got a very relaxed Tennant. Liz Sladen's hand on his shoulder, him resting against his TARDIS, looking very happy and in control. You know, he's framed more or less in the middle, you know, his face more or less in the center. He's kind of the centerpiece of the image. So where he belongs, Tennant on the front cover of Doctor Who magazine, whatever the reason, whatever the Doctor, whatever the cause or the motivation, that's where Tennant's meant to be, right? He belongs on Doctor Who magazine's cover, come hell or high water. It's kind of his natural habitat in a way. I think of it like, you know how he punishes the family of blood, being of human nature, and he like traps someone inside the mirror? I think a part of Tennant's soul is kind of trapped inside the cover of Doctor Who magazine, and it keeps resurging out every 2 or 3 issues. I think that's what's going on here. But a lot of people don't believe that, or at least they resist it, and they were upset that an issue commemorating the Sarah Jane Adventures, because this has got a huge, this issue is like this huge section going over every serial in Sarah Jane Adventures, and it's got a ton of interviews. It's, yeah, if you like Sarah Jane Adventures, you should read 588 because it's full of so much stuff on the show. So why isn't Liz Sladen in the center? People cried, and people were actually quite upset about this. And yeah, I mean, sure, she's not in the center. David Tennant is absolutely the centered one in that shot on the cover of the magazine, which is about her show more than it is about the 10th Doctor or David Tennant or whatever. And so that made a lot of people really, really cross. What do you guys think of that?
I think it's like completely understandable and just, I think just the context was a huge part of this though as well, because the Tennant mania and kind of the bristling Tennant not just being back, but also being so centered in all of the marketing stuff, license stuff, promotional stuff for years, even before RTD2. I think that is the context for all of this. So deploying Tennant in such a way, with a caption saying, "We love Sarah Jane," and just Tennant grinning out there, in the photo from a show that he was in, one story of? He just sort of just grinning there. It's funny. It is very off-kilter and strange. Like, the choice of photograph is incongruous.
Especially when one of the other covers is just one of the Vok robots from the Robots of Death. It's like, you don't have to have Tennant on there, if you're going to put a fucking Vok robot on there.
There's got to be a way to get Tennant into Caldor City so we can get a cover with both of those iconic faces. It really is like, I feel like this started fermenting in maybe even the Capaldi era. Maybe. Never to like the degree that it was in the Jodie era, but kind of this increasing sense of Tennant sells, or the 10th Doctor sells. If we get his face on something, it sells quite well. And this just bubbled up more and more and more and more throughout the Jodie era, where we got that odd thing where the EU was kind of, he took control. Well, it's not Tennant because he's not in most of these things. It's the 10th Doctor's likeness. Kind of took control in some ways. And of course, it's ridiculous to kind of act like the character's taking control. All it's happening is if the 10th Doctor apparently sells more if his face is on the cover. So, especially when the comics are struggling, we're going to have more storylines of the 10th Doctor. Tennant is up to recording more audios. Lockdown happens and we get loads of Tennant audios. More and more Tennant is going to be around. It's not like a Machiavellian thing that's happened, but it has happened. And I know it makes a lot of people very angry because they feel like the 13th Doctor got eclipsed in lots of ways. And then, it was mean magic. She literally she turned into David Tennant. This, it's no conspiracies that everyone complaining about. I feel like Jodie's era has been getting overridden by David Tennant. You were right. You were absolutely right, and it literally happened. So, like, they weren't crazy for pointing this out. They were 100% literally correct. And so, it's a very sore spot for some people that, I mean, he's the incumbent Doctor, but it's like even a magazine about the Sarah Jane Adventures, he's still going to be like the centerpiece at the cover. I mean, you can argue this is an extraordinarily small and tiny issue, but I understand why this is of huge repeated frustration to people.
And of course, now it's happened again with the latest issue, with just randomly doing the idiot's lantern on the cover.
Coronation.
For no reason other than it's got a vague, loose connection to the coronation of the upcoming monarch who nobody cares about or likes, and they just have a reason to dump Tennant on the front instead of any of the other news pertaining to the issue.
My thinking is that, yes, Shudi's going to be a big part of the coronation. Is it the coronation itself? Coronation celebration? What's he part of?
Yeah, there's like a coronation celebration that's going to be airing, and the Royal Shakespeare Company are doing something with the BBC, and they're going to have actors reading out Shakespeare quotes, or something like that, and Gatwa's involved in it.
Shudi was forced at gunpoint to do this. Shudi was, the BBC forced him at gunpoint to sign some contract saying, we know that you're a extraordinarily anti-royalist. We know this. We know you are super cool and you have the exact same politics as me and you despise Charles. We know this. But we, the BBC, are forcing you, an actor, to take paid work. We know you don't want to do this. We know it's killing you to be on screen in front of millions of people. We know it's killing you to get paid. We know it's killing you to be part of something huge like this. But we've got this gun, we've got this laser pointed at your head, and you need to sign and you need to do this. I know that you can't communicate directly to your fans to tell them you have the exact same politics as them, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. You need to take this work and get paid for it, or else you get it.
They took his family hostage like Martha's in The Sound of Drums. Yeah, he just has them all like tied up in the Valiant somewhere.
It's that evil Russell. He uses any excuse for publicity. You will support the monarchy. And
also Moffat was involved, and it's all Moffat's fault somehow. He personally held that gun to Gatwa's head.
Yeah, Moffat did it somehow. Yeah, it's too insane to think that an actor could possibly want paid work. It's too insane to think they could want to seen on screen in such a huge, well, in person in such a huge celebration as that. It's far too insane.
The contract for becoming Doctor Who has a big clause about monarchy events. If you act the Doctor, you are forced by contract to do anything that pertains to the monarchy. Or if the Queen dies, you must do this and this. Yeah, it's all in there. Pages 5 through 10. Yeah, should have read it.
I know Shudi better than he knows himself. I know exactly how actors work. That's why this is all happening. It's not infantilizing at all to ascribe to him all these motivations and politics. It's not at all. But also in terms of ascribing motivations, Russell explains the deal with that Doctor Who magazine cover, kind of inadvertently, in that same production notes letter in 588. He says, the work, like the work on Sarah Jane Adventures, didn't stop there with the curse. As soon as Doctor Who magazine suggested a celebration of Sarah Jane Adventures, I said, ooh, we can use those photos as a cover at last. The shoot you can see emblazoned on this month's magazine was taken for the wedding of Sarah Jane Smith with the promise of a Radio Times cover, which never happened. Maybe there was football or a weather balloon, something less important than Sarah Jane Adventures anyway, but the photos were quietly shelved until this year when I said, their time has come. Problem, said this magazine's editor, puffing on a pipe in his winged back chair. Well, that's how I imagine him, don't argue. He said, we don't own those photographs. We'd have to license them, which costs, and this is magazine publishing. In 2023, money is tight. But again, people sprang into action. Mandy Thwaites from BBC Studios was enormously helpful and traced the photographs by Sven Arnstein back to their source at Immediate Media. And amazingly, Immediate Media agreed to let Doctor Who magazine have the image free of charge.
Wow.
For which we're immensely grateful. That's a lot of people taking a lot of time out to do a lot of work to restore the Sarah Jane Adventures to its proper place. And do you know why? Because it was loved. It's loved now. We love Sarah Jane and we love Liz Sladen beyond measure. This one's for you, Liz. The cover at last. Thanks, darling. Thanks for absolutely everything. I miss you.
I think the fact they were intended for Radio Times makes sense. I think there's a different kind of vibe to a Radio Times cover than to like a Doctor Who magazine cover.
Yeah.
Because Radio Times is advertising to like the whole TV audience. So Tennant and Sarah Jane, obviously you can center, the Doctor cameoing on Sarah Jane, like the collab. It's important. It's a big thing. That's going to play differently to Doctor Who magazine audiences. So that makes more sense of the incongruity, I think. But that is a lovely story. That, again, more people doing free work for Sarah Jane.
Really adds to the myth, like, oh, Russell can do anything. He can command anything because of the respect he's earned, that kind of myth that's building in the other production notes, as you said. People doing free work for him.
He's casting a spell on them. It's one of those things, like, you cannot intuit that at all from the cover. You don't look at the cover and go, this seems to me like a shelved Radio Times cover. So therefore, Tennant's centrality makes perfect sense, much as I may personally have preferred Sladen being the salient centerpiece of the cover. Like, you cannot intuit that. So it's like, in no way does that invalidate, people getting shirty about the cover.
Yeah.
But it also is one of those, I think it's a kind of running theme of the RTD2 era, where it's like, there's something that feels awful, and then it's deflated in like a very pragmatic and kind of warm way. I think this has happened a couple of times now. And it's not like a fool me once thing. It's not like you should go, well, hold on. I actually think, there's going to be a reason for this. Like, I don't think you should like stop freaking out if something seems wrong, but I just think there's almost a kind of comedy to how this keeps happening.
Yeah, just like a running theme is something very sincere and warm going into it, and then coming out in a way that immediately gets interpreted as like cynical or negative or like bad. I think often purely through misfortune, sometimes through disagreements of idea, like the whole costume gate scenario and the burning costume. That was just a case of like radically different viewpoints. But in a case like this, when you've got something as near to people's hearts as Sarah Jane and Liz Sladen and stuff to do with that, I think it's certainly a context where more assumption of good faith might be warranted, I think, when it comes to something like this. As much as, again, I get it, but like the thing that is the actual story behind it is so hard to like take issue with, because it was so sincere on the part of everyone trying to go into it. Again, intention is not magic. But nonetheless, it is just a Doctor Who magazine cover at the end of the day. Like, God, it's not that important.
You can make new ones. I see fans do better ones sometimes. So
yeah, people were designing their idea for the new issue before the cover was revealed. People were like photoshopping on Gallifrey Base. Yes,
I'm not laughing at them. Like I'm completely laughing with them. I just think it's absurd in a very endearing way that the magazine takes a little too long, and then people's own creativity comes to the fore and they make their own cover. Something I love about this fandom is they will do it themselves. We will do it ourselves, which I love.
And some would say their efforts were better than the actual thing.
And the last actual thing we really have to discuss today is Liberation of the Daleks, the 14th Doctor's first story, the comic that's been running through Doctor Who magazine in the lead up to the 60th. We've been discussing it in bursts along these RTD2 pre-60th airing chats. And so we'll discuss the last 3 issues of it in 588, 589, 590 Doctor Who magazines. Do you remember what happened in the last one we covered that reveal like hologrammy, Dalek, virtual reality, fake, not quite real stuff?
Or like a theme park or like a zoo or something like that, like a tourist attraction.
Tourist thing. Yeah.
Yeah, like a theme parky thing. So what happens next in 588 is we see like a medieval castle and the Daleks are swirling around, and it's all like theme parky stuff, and knights are fighting and Daleks are fighting dragons, and wow, look at this big art. This is part 5 of Liberation of the Daleks. And then we go back to like the towery place that Nate was explaining all like the cameos in, and it's the 14th Doctor and that Georgette lady are talking about what's going on. We see this dome that's shaped like a Dalek's head and saying Daleks versus dragons, Daleks invasion Earth 1966 AD, Daleks of the Sierra Madre, even a Dalek wedding zone. I think this is a tacky, tasteless tourist trap. 14 does a big thumbs down. 0 out of 5 stars would not recommend. And then a anthropomorphized bipedal lion walks up to 14 with a button saying, "Hi, I'm the chief" on it. And he starts saying, no, there's educational value to what we're doing here. And we see like there's a Dalek like touristy thing that like has buttons on it that you can press, in like this theme park zone. And 14's like, what's going on with you talking lion? And so the place they're at used to be like an animal park, but then they banned clone safaris. And so the staff had made themselves the livestock, so they'd still have jobs. So the lion's working at the place now. There's a little, there's a bit more world building about that. Development of the relationship with this kind of companion. The Doctor breaks into like the control zone with 13th Sonic, and he sees the kind of source of this, which is we've got a Dalek mutant that's being like, it's quite horrific. It's like in this watery cage thing and all its tentacles are being pulled. And 14 says, what my TARDIS landed in was real, a dream made flesh, and here's the dreamer. Trouble is, they just woke up.
Okay, that's an escalation.
Yeah.
This feels like quite a strange comic, to be honest. Like, you're making it sound kind of appealing here. Like, you've got zoo staff turning themselves into animals to be the livestock, and also, so one of them's a talking lion, and you've got also Dalek trapped in a prison that's dreaming a zoo. It feels like that. It feels like much more of that sort of fountain of ideas that's kind of rushing at you. It's like the ideal Doctor Who comic, I guess.
Then in part 6, so in Mag 589, it opens with like this drop from a helicopter thing, and it's like this big pink and purpley sky. Arrow shoots, and it's like this Dalek war zone. There's a saucer crashed into the ground, and there's like split Daleks around the place. Specimen 6 Sigma. And so 14's looking at the Dalek. You should have left it to die. Instead, you brought it here and made it your performing seal. So they've taken this Dalek from like this zone that they've dropped into, these people, and they're like manipulating it, the mutant, into progeniting, like being the progenitor for these dreams, I guess, this virtual reality type thing. The Doctor says, I understand. 12 Dalek zones, 12 colored mutants, each with a neocortex linked directly to a room full of, what do you call it, psychoplasm. And we start seeing there's actually loads of Dalek mutants that are being used in this way to like host the different weird reality things.
Starting to see where this is going now. We've got a whole bunch of Daleks.
Yeah. The Doctor says each mutant thinking they're the big boss in a quantum simulation, which tourists are teleported into. Matrix of the Daleks. And then we see some of the tourists like enjoying it, and you know, they think they're in a night land, they think they're in whatever land. The Doctor is unimpressed by all this, but like the tech workers at the place are like, this is what we do. And so we go on, and like the Supreme Dalek is checking out the TARDIS, and one of the Daleks is talking to the Supreme Dalek and saying, the Doctor did not lie, we are all the same, which was something the Doctor said to them earlier in one of the earlier issues of the comic. The Dalek mutant, like trapped in the thing, is looking at the Doctor, and 14 says, what are you looking at, big boy? Do you know where you are? And so 14's kind of talking to him, and, you know, 14 face plants, and he's talking about my TARDIS, I hope it's not getting damaged. He runs out to the TARDIS, and the Supreme Dalek is like in there. And so that's like the end of that issue. And then the latest one in Mag 589. In part 7, we're in the TARDIS, and it's Jodie's TARDIS, of course. So 14's in there with his kind of companion, and he's like a hologram inside the TARDIS, the 14th Doctor. We've kind of flashed back a little bit to when the companion entered the TARDIS, which is before the Supreme Dalek got in there at the end of the last issue. So 14's hologram is helping her out. But then the Supreme Dalek breaks in, and, you know, they're saying all evil Dalek-y things as they enter Jodie's TARDIS. At the moment of singularity, Dalek crew will be the last living organisms in the cosmos. And so the Daleks are warping and using the TARDIS, and 14's angry. Shut that door and keep it shut, I said. What dimension is this? Are Daleks the dominant species here? The Daleks say as they exit the TARDIS, which is now somewhere else. And they're saying that these, like, tourist Daleks are not Daleks, they are crude simulations with a computer memory. Supreme Dalek is angry at the Doctor. Doctor tries to sonic them. You lot are all just simulacra made of psychoplasmic stuff. Look, I'll prove it. And so he's using his sonic. Look at the molecular density readings. And the Supreme Dalek's getting annoyed at him. And he's like putting his plunger near 14. And then the Supreme Dalek uses his plunger to like slap Jodie's sonic out of 14's hand. And the Doctor says, look, my sonic's no good to you. That data's all in Gallifreyan. And the Dalek says, their meaning is displayed on your physiognomy. And the Supreme Dalek says, destroy that object. 14 goes, what? No. And 13's sonic gets destroyed. It's split into thirds by red Dalek beams.
No.
And the Doctor sinks to the ground and he looks extraordinarily upset as the Sonic burns in front of him. And 14 says, "You killed my Sonic, my Swiss Army Sonic, made from Sheffield steel. I went everywhere with that Sonic, and you've only gone and killed it." Then all the tourists crowd around, and they think the Supreme Dalek, like the real Dalek, is part of the show. And so they're all going, exterminate me, we want to take photos. Yeah, we saw you exterminate that device, exterminate us, this is so much fun. And a kid's like poking a water pistol or something. "Excuse me, Mr. Dalek, can you exterminate me?" And 14's like, "No, everyone get out of here." And everyone's cheering, "Yay, I want to be exterminated." And someone says, "You can exterminate my husband any day." And, everyone's like coming around the Daleks, the real Daleks wanting to get exterminated. And 14 tries to, grab some and run away. And that's the end of that issue.
I will say, putting those words in the new Doctor's mouth, like, my Swiss Army Sonic made of Sheffield steel. On one hand, it feels both like the most utterly perfunctory lip service to, like, whatever, 13 stuff they're trying to reference here. And it also feels deeply wrong as well.
Yeah, it does.
Because it's just like, why are you bringing this back? Please, you're destroying the Sonic. Let the conceptual language around the Sonic die with it, please. I'm begging you.
The art of... I know you would have seen the art of the Sonic getting destroyed.
Yeah.
I assume. But the art of his reaction is better. Wait.
Yeah, the face he pulls. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think when you've got real Daleks and fake, like, simulated Daleks and confusion between the two of them and all kinds of... The TARDIS flying around, the hologram 14, I think you mentioned, and the real 14, and a random new companion, yeah, possibly a bit... And not that many pages per issue. I will say about this image of 10, this image of 14, the way they've drawn his face, like as strange as it looks, they've certainly got that thing that Tennant does with his face a lot. Like it's been called gurning at times, but his faces of extreme bewilderment and disgust and surprise and horror that he always pulls, they've channeled that quite well, even if it's not that much of a likeness.
Yeah. It's a weird... I appreciate that the comic is not just like... I mean, it is a Dalek story and everything, but it could have been more trad. It could have been a much simpler shooty, well, like gun shooty type of story. And I kind of appreciate that it's a bit weirder and more convoluted and kind of caught up in virtual realities and Daleks being tortured and stuff. I like that it's going for something a little bit weirder, even if it's not that characterful. I appreciate that there's some weirdness in it.
I love that just at some point in the planning of this story, we're like, okay, and now we're going to have this whole chapter where basically all that happens is the Sonic gets destroyed. But we just obliterate that Sonic on a bit of paper, right? We're never showing it on camera ever again. It will already have been long gone by the time RTD2 actually starts. We're just going to act like it never fucking existed. We're going to relegate the destruction of the Sonic to a comic. Did you say you have one more thing about Murray to add, or was that something else?
Oh, just that. Just to kind of finish things off, we talked a lot about how we think, Murray is actually, like, there's a uniqueness to keeping the same person sometimes. And there's a uniqueness to, like, the Motivic universe he created musically that other composers obviously can do incredibly good jobs, but there's a uniqueness to kind of keeping this specific pool and this very adaptive composer going through that pool. That there is a kind of worth and credibility to doing that. But we didn't talk about another kind of factor of that, which is a young composer being stiffed out of the job by keeping the old guy in there? Because there's a lot of this idea of ladder pulling with RTD2. How would you guys respond to that?
I think in this case, I think it's a bit strange to think that the composer of like a show as old and as illustrious as this is necessarily going to be a young person anyway. I think there are lots of roles in the show throughout Doctor Who, and there are a lot of roles, people get involved with, where it makes complete sense for new talent to be brought in, like younger people, like all kinds of people, like an introduction, like junior positions on the show, and all kinds of different like roles. Like, but the composer, I mean, that is easily as important a job as the head writer, right?
Yeah.
And so you're not going to get someone who's like, you're not going to get someone who's green. You're not going to get someone who's never done like drama before, or just it's such an important role. So it's just weird to think of it as like something that you can just easily hand off to like it's not an experimental role. It's not a piece of the show that you should just like try new things with, like experiment with a little bit and you can toss it out if it doesn't work. This is a really fucking important role on a big ass show, right?
I feel like maybe they've done that kind of stuff with spin-offs.
Yeah.
But not the main show.
That happened in RTD1. Murray had a position to a degree on, Torchwood at least, but it was other composers that were much younger composers. Sam Watts was in his early 20s, was my understanding, when he started doing the Sarah Jane Adventures. And I think we know RTD2 is going to have spin-offs, and Murray won't be composing those, surely, because he's got so much work to do with the Mothership show. So I think we have that kind of extremely important Mothership, huge responsibility role is staying with, Murray. But then we have, it's not like the opportunities don't exist. Technically, there's more composer opportunities here than were in Chibnall's Doctor Who or in Moffat's Doctor Who without spin-offs. You know what I mean? Like, there will be opportunities for different composers to come in here because there will be different shows. So I feel like we can kind of have our cake and eat it too here. We can have Murray in the main job and we can get other composers, whether they're younger or just not Murray people, in the other roles. So I feel like there's not even necessarily a conflict here. We can have both.
So what you mean by that is you will be watching the UNET spin-off after all?
No. There'll be more spin-offs than that. So I will be interested who they get for the music though. Like if it'll be Blair Mowat, who I wouldn't surprise me, or if they get, it'd be interesting to see, because they don't have to do all the music necessarily. Like Torchwood was not just one person doing the music for that. There was more than one person there. I think maybe like John Williams sometimes will do like the main theme for a Star Wars film and then someone else does the rest of it. Like I could see a kind of scenario, maybe you could get someone in kind of green to one of the spin-offs if there was like a little direction of maybe someone else is doing some of it, or, Murray's there or Blair's there or somewhere to kind of be around. But, we can try out a much younger person or much greener into the role person to see how it goes. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Like, that could work, as we've got like the whole facility of RTD2 and we can have all sorts of professionals around. I think that makes sense more than the deep end of Doctor Who, which the spin-offs and the ancillary stuff, I think, is the kind of the can be a sort of training ground in a very fruitful way that doesn't overburden. It's kind of a safer environment to build up, I think, in some ways as well. And, I don't love the talk of the Big Finish pipeline that's been intimated. I'd be more an adherent of how to blow up a Big Finish pipeline, I think is it's more my thinking. I don't like the idea of funneling Big Finish writers, maybe two exceptions. I don't really like that idea. I would like totally greener people, getting funneled into the spin-offs and things and whatnot. But there's going to be so much content getting made, for better or worse, that even if RTD was ageist, I don't think he's going to have enough people of that age. They're going to have to go to the bins. They're going to have to go to the bins. Gatiss is going to have to go to the bins and get some people, just because so much stuff is going to get made that there will be opportunities happening whether they like it or not. So that's a good thing.
I generally like the idea of people training up in other things that aren't Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And being good at those in their own right, kind of thing. That sounds sensible to me. But
Yeah.
With Doctor Who, it's not a museum exhibit behind the glass that cannot be touched, but it's also not like a toy you can just like throw around or like a rag, or give it to your cat to just like slap around or whatever. Like, it's neither of those things. It's in the middle. It's something that has to be run with a great degree of competence and confidence and security, while also being like brought strongly into the future in like ways that are like well conceived and coherent. So it's between those things. It's not, I think that between us is why you get people on either side of the aisle, people thinking, well, nothing must change, and people think everything must change. But the reality is that it's not either of those, basically. It's in between.
I also think, like Dilb, I think, was suggesting there, all the best, this is my opinion, but I think all the best creatives, I mean, even producers actually, are the people who, it's not like they formed from a certain IP in like the fandom space, then moved into it in the worker space and then like stayed there. It's a very kind of a blinkered channel that I think you look at what people will generally say are the best Doctor Who writers. On audio, they're going to say Robert Shearman. On TV, they're going to say, I don't know, David Whittaker or Stephen Moffat or something. And these are people who did lots of other stuff beforehand, and they had lots of other experiences that fed into their creativity and fed into how they wrote Doctor Who. I think for like this sounds patronizing, and I don't mean it to be, but I think like for the own sake of certain writers, I know it's so tricky because original content is hard to make these days in the first place. So I kind of get the security of the IP. And, they love the IP. I understand all that.
Yeah.
But I also don't think that, like, trying to get onto the IP first is always the most fruitful thing for anyone in a way. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's not the most fruitful thing for the IP either, because you don't want it to be self-cannibalizing. You want it to actually draw in like the experience, knowledge, and techniques from like the rest of the world. Like there is an entire planet out there. You don't just want Doctor Who like a human centipede, like a Roboros, like feeding its own like cliches and recycled tropes into itself forevermore. You need to actually get stuff from outside.
Yeah.
And that's true of something like Star Wars as well. You know, it's always good when people remember that George Lucas was influenced by, Kurosawa and stuff. And then you got people like Tony Gilroy who came from completely outside the Star Wars world to do something. It's not just, I was inspired by Doctor Who, so I'm just going to write Doctor Who kind of thing.
Yeah, like when Tony Gilroy talks, just to interrupt, when Tony Gilroy talks about Andor, right, he doesn't mention referencing like other Star Wars stuff. He references actual historical movements and revolutions and people who actually fought and died in the real context and stuff. That's what he's bringing in. He's not just referencing his nostalgia from some old movies.
I think this isn't even really a comment on the quality, but like the Mandalorian show, it was like pulling from things Lucas pulled from himself, like old Flash Gordon serial type storytelling and certain things in that vein, or things of that time at least.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I think J.J. Abrams was pulling more from Star Wars films. He was pulling from the original trilogy films. And of course he like alludes to Apocalypse Now and other stuff like that, but I feel like largely he was pulling from the Star Wars films. So it feels like a Star Wars movie, but it's also kind of a like simulacra in some ways, isn't it? It's a kind of copy of a copy.
It's a copy of a copy, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah,
in some ways. Whereas like The Mandalorian, I mean, I don't even like the first season of it or anything, but I can still see it kind of feels Star Wars-y, if we can use that extremely nebulous term, in that it's not pulling from the way the story was told in the original film so much as it's pulling from what Lucas pulled from. And so even though it's a totally different thing, like it's a web streaming show instead of a film, it kind of has something to do with the tone that feels right there, or the construction of it that feels right there, because it's like pulling from the same pool that he pulled from. And I think when it comes to Doctor Who, what someone like Shearman is bringing to it is like the theatrical experience, and expertise. It's not just that he's a huge, enormous Doctor Who fan who has written like reference criticism books on Doctor Who. There is that, of course, but there's also everything else that he's pulling into it. So I'm kind of wary of sometimes where I sometimes think people will like this idea of you can be a fan of Doctor Who so much, you can love Doctor Who so much that you get onto the show. Like you go from fan into the show, which I know has happened sometimes, like in the wilderness here and whatnot, but I'm like kind of wary of that as the ideal. I don't think that even makes sense as the ideal necessarily. You want to bring yourself into Doctor Who. You don't want to bring your Doctor Who fandom into Doctor Who necessarily. I think, at least as a consumer of Doctor Who, that's what I would kind of prefer from people, if that makes sense. Or my opinion. I mean, if we're talking about uniqueness, is that the resistance to Murray Gold, is that you want something unique, but to be unique, it has to be from somewhere that's not Doctor Who, right? Or not your experience of Doctor Who. It has to be something else that you are bringing into Doctor Who.
Is there any other composer in the world, this is a question for Neo, the soundtrack guy, is there any other composer in the world who you think, even though obviously you wouldn't want to replace Murray Gold, you think could build their own cinematic, sound motivic universe that could stand up to Murray Gold's, like eventually, if they were to do Doctor Who? Is there anyone at all?
Yeah, like there's plenty, especially if you're pulling from film, but are they the ones that have such a deep connection with, Davies and Moffat and the Doctor as a character, and, to build up, I think the kind of knowledge that Murray has built up and that kind of reflexive, creative understanding of the characters and the themes, like the literary themes of the show and everything, I think that isn't replicable at all, really at this point, because that comes from him being in on the ground floor of the revived series in some ways. To kind of side answer your question though, a composer who I think is really good at building like TV motivic universes, specifically even much more so than Murray Gold in terms of being very experimental with the instrumentation and the genre, is I talk about this sometimes. I know Dill feels the same way, is Lorne Balfe, who I think does a lot of crap scores. I think he does a lot of Where's My Money? I think he does a lot of those scores on TV and film.
You see the new Chris Evans film and you think, oh, wonder who's composing this? Oh, Lorne Balfe.
God.
I don't know how much he's doing. I don't know if he's doing a Hans Zimmer and like handing this off to his underlings. He does a lot of crap scores, absolutely. And his Dark Material score is like pretty good, but it's not like, I don't write home about that as a fantasy score. It's just a pretty good fantasy score. There's some memorable bits, there's some not so memorable bits. But his Wheel of Time score is like whenever you see an interview with him about it, it's like that Murray-esque thing of he's exploding with and I think this, and I think this, and I think this, and I interpret it this way, and I see it this way, and I see it this way, and this is what I want to do, and I want to do this. He's obviously extremely passionate about it.
Yeah.
And he's got, this complexity of lots of motifs, even though he's only done 8 episodes of the show so far, because only 8 episodes are out so far. He's built up quite a few motifs as he's gone. But what he's done more is kind of pushed against the orthodoxy of genre. We had this less with science fiction. Like Murray does a lot of different genres, and that doesn't really freak people out because Doctor Who's a kind of quasi-anthology show. But with fantasy, people say, you give me the woodwinds, and you give me the violins, and then you step out.
Yeah.
You don't go, we're going to have some piano. We're going to have some piano. But, even though that makes zero sense if you're doing the pseudo-historical thing. But anyway, people have an expectation with fantasy, and Lorne Balfe just totally pushes against that, and he makes this incredible, bizarre mix of like world music with pop music with just all sorts of strange things. So
electric guitars and deep pulsing industrial beats.
He's the ambition that I would like in like Doctor Who music, and that I think Murray brings to this constant reinvention. Lorne Balfe is that, at least in one show.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean he could be transplanted from that to Doctor Who, because it's about that's his passion.
It's basically just me saying that's another TV composer I think does really good work.
Yeah, because he's passionate about Wheel of Time and in tune with the show's themes, like the thematic, stuff, not just like the music themes. In the same way that Murray Gold is in tune with Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So they're doing similar things, but
I think they also it's deeper than just, this character is bad, so he has a bad sounding theme. I think they both think on a much deeper kind of level to do with the setting. Like Lorne Balfe does that huge like remixy version of the music because that's kind of what the show is about, is like this kind of cycle of history where, everything gets jumbled together and remixed together and cultures are mixed together and different time periods are mixed together.
Yeah.
And he conveys that musically by like synthesizing, pop music with more traditional fantasy music with rock music. And that's kind of the way it's like not just the themes of the show, like literary themes. And it's not just like the concepts of the characters. It's like the actual world building is constantly dripping away musically. And I think Murray does some of that in terms of how he approaches the genre kind of the music he's doing as well. So yeah, it's basically they just think about it very deeply. I think both of them. So that's our little nerd out about Lorne Balfe.
Cool.
Because Lorne did this great little thing that I would love Murray to do, where he went through like a big scene and did like a commentary for it and explained his reasoning.
Yeah.
And it was so cool. Like he was saying, oh yeah, so this character is from this Order of Witches, and we use the theme for the Order of Witches when she's introduced because that's what she represents. But then that's because we're from the perspective of these characters who don't know who she is. They just know she's one of the witches, basically. But then she also has her own theme for more intimate kind of things,
which we don't see until yeah. It's very representational. Yeah.
So many just perspectives. This is the Wheel of Time podcast now.
Composer commentaries, that's something RTD should look into. Just Gold commentating every episode.
Oh, yeah.
And also a big thing with soundtrack releases now is that a lot of things will get like multiple releases for like each series. So like The Mandalorian, that had like a new soundtrack release for every chapter. And Lorne Balfe's done his like sketches, Hans Zimmer's done sketches where it's like things that aren't actually in the show.
Yeah.
But the show draws from it, and then it'll also do the stuff that was actually in the show. So I wonder if Murray could do that, or if he'll just go with the Series 9 route of just these like big, massive 4-disc box set, and Heaven Sent, got his own disc and stuff.
You know what I want to happen? I want to stop losing bits of songs from his episodes that just go missing and don't appear on the soundtracks. I want that to end.
Yeah.
Because that's been driving many people mad for years now. I think it's only fair we should get the whole soundtrack. Don't leave us hanging on some of the best songs.
Yeah.
On that note of longing, let's end. And that wraps up our chat covering Murray Gold's rehiring as composer for Doctor Who and all sorts of other things that have transpired over February, March, April 2023 in the lead up to RTD2 actually premiering with the David Tennant specials. Let us know what you thought of the sort of things we talked about, anything we didn't bring up that you think was relevant to stuff we were discussing, any of your thoughts on what we said or the things we were talking about. We would love to hear those. These are all super interesting topics. What did you think of the sort of things we were talking about? Let us know. And as always, cheers for listening very much. Thanks.